Chapter 1848. The plain-dressed woman watched for a long time before speaking. She turned to look at the disbelieving old man. She opened her palm and pressed it down lightly. Bang! In an instant, the space around the old man twisted and became illusory. Gradually, the old man turned into a huge old man. From the outside, he looked no different from a human. However, he was more than 3 times bigger than a human. Not only that, his body was covered in a layer of white light. At first glance, he looked like a man made of light. This was the old man's real body. The plain-dressed woman sized up the old man. "What is this? So ugly." The old man roared, "Lowly human, you are all created by us, the God clan. How dare you?" The plain-dressed woman waved her sleeve. A ray of sword light pierced the old man's forehead. Bang! The layer of light on the old man's body shattered and only an illusory soul remained. The old man's expression froze and his eyes were filled with fear. "You? How could you hurt me?" the plain-dressed woman said. "You created humans." The old man stared at the plain-dressed woman. At this moment he finally became clear-headed. The human before him was different. At this moment, an extremely terrifying aura suddenly spread from afar. Seeing this, the old man's expression became ferocious. "Lord Wu Wei is here. Woman, you are finished." The plain-dressed woman suddenly drew her sword and slashed. In the distance, a bloody head flew out. Instant kill. Seeing this, the old man was dumbfounded. Instant kill? The plain-dressed woman looked around and shook her head. A trace of disappointment flashed in her eyes. Are the so-called God clan that created humans so weak? As she spoke, she looked at the old man in confusion. Didn't you create humans? Why are you so weak? The old man's expression was extremely ugly. Lowly human, if you want to kill me, then kill me. Don't insult me. The God clan is not something that lowly humans like you can insult. The plain-dressed woman shook her head. I won't kill you. As she spoke, she walked away. After taking 2 steps, she turned to look at the old man. Because you are too weak to die under my sword. The old man spat out a mouthful of blood. Meanwhile, the woman in a plain dress had already vanished at the end of the horizon. The old man's expression was unsightly to the extreme. How could this human be so strong? At that moment, a middle-aged man appeared in front of the elder. The middle-aged man wore a silver crown on his head. Upon seeing the middle-aged man, the old man hastily said, "Lord Ping Yang." The middle-aged man frowned slightly. "A human broke through the restrictions we set up?" The old man hurriedly nodded. "Yes." Ping Yang Lord sized up the old man. "You're not his match?" The old man's face turned ugly. "I'm not her match." Hearing this, Ping Yang Jun's frown deepened. A hint of doubt flashed in his eyes. How is this possible? Even if a human from the lower realm cultivates to the extreme, he would not be able to harm the divine humans. How could a human harm you? The old man said in a deep voice, "That's also what I'm curious about, but her sword can indeed kill me." With that said, he looked at Lord Ping Yang. "Lord Ping Yang, what should we do now?" Lord Ping Yang slowly closed his eyes. "I thought that everything was under our control. I didn't expect that some humans had already escaped our control." The old man nodded. "That woman is very strong." Lord Ping Yang suddenly said, "Where did she go?" The old man pointed into the distance. "Over there." Lord Ping Yang looked in the direction the old man was pointing, his eyes cold. "We can't let this person live, and we can't let her come into contact with the divine human's divine Tao civilization." With that said, he turned his head. "Pass down the order to capture this woman. I want her alive. Only a living person has research value." A voice rang out in the dark. "Yes, sir." Lord Ping Yang looked into the distance and smiled. "I want to see how strong this woman who escaped our restrictions is. However, since she could escape our restrictions, it proves that she's extraordinary. She has high research value. We must capture her alive." With that said, he disappeared on the spot. North Pole Star region. Jingji had also broken through. As for what realm, she did not know. In any case, he had broken through. After Jingji and Shaoan broke through, they could leave the current universe's spacetime at will. However, they did not dare stay in the current universe's spacetime for too long. There was a very scary and mysterious power in the current universe's spacetime. It was the power that Yi Xian had seen. Even now, they were extremely fearful of that mysterious power. Shaoan suddenly said, "I can feel that stone door." Jingji said, "Me too." The 2 women could feel that stone door. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "I can't feel it." Shaoan looked at Yi Xian. "I'll wait for you." Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "That stone gate should be outside the universe." Xiaowen nodded. It should be. Yi Xian suddenly looked around and shook his head with a smile. He did not expect that the ancient demons and the very ones would be finished. He was ready to fight to the death. He did not expect that the ancient life and the very one water would come to find his father. What was even more unexpected was that they had actually managed to get his father to come over. They were wiped out. What the hell? Jingji suddenly said, "What do you plan to do next?" Yi Xian smiled. "Of course, I'm going to go outside the current universe to see. But before that, I have to take care of things around me." Jingji nodded. "Then I'll wait for you." Yi Xian blinked. "Wait for me?" Jingji smiled. "I feel very safe when I'm with you, young Master Yi." Yi Xian was speechless. Jingji looked at Xiaowen. "If you want to fight, I'll be waiting." After that, she turned and left. Yi Xian looked at Xiaowen, but Xiaowen did not speak. Yi Xian smiled. "Come with me." Xiaowen nodded. "Okay." Yi Xian left with Xiaowen. Fan Duo, who was sitting cross-legged in the clouds, suddenly raised her head. At this moment, Yi Xian and Xiaowen appeared in front of her. Fan Duo was about to speak when she suddenly looked at Xiaowen and frowned. "You." Yi Xian smiled. "Xiaowen has broken through her limits and attained the soul realm." Fan Duo's expression instantly changed when she heard this. "Really?" Xiaowen nodded. Yi Xian looked at Xiaowen. "Xiaowen, can you give her some guidance?" Xiaowen thought for a moment and said, "The reason I was able to break through was because your father forcefully broke through some sort of seal. I don't know exactly what that seal was, but I'm able to sense the seal within her body. But I can't break it." Yi Xian frowned. "Seal?" Xiaowen nodded. "It seems like everyone has it." "No." As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. "You don't seem to have it within you." Yi Xian glanced at his own body. "I don't have it within me?" Xiaowen nodded slightly. "I can't sense it." Yi Xian said solemnly, "What kind of seal is it?" Xiaowen shook her head. "I don't know. I can sense it but I can't break it." "But..." At this point she wanted to say something but hesitated. Yi Xian smiled. "Is there something you can't say?" Xiaowen said solemnly, "I can share my experience with her, but if no one can break the seal within her, then even if she reaches her limits, it will be difficult for her to reach the next level. At most she can only reach the level of Tai Water." Tai Water. This person hadn't truly attained the soul realm. However, she was able to jump out of this universe for a short period of time, and that was already very terrifying. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then looked at Fan Duo. "Then you should learn from Xiaowen first. In the future I'll ask Qing'er or Dad to help you break the seal within you. What do you think?" Fan Duo smiled. "Thank you." Xiaowen suddenly said, "Do you want to try using the Azure Sword?" "The Azure Sword?" Yi Xian frowned. He looked at the Azure Sword in his hand. "Can I?" Xiaowen said, "You can try. Because this sword of yours is very unusual." Yi Xian said solemnly, "But I can't sense the seal within her." Xiaowen said, "I'll help you." As she spoke, she opened her right hand and pressed it lightly towards Fan Duo. This pressure caused Fan Duo's body to tremble, and then a blurry black mark appeared above her head. Xiaowen looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian drew his sword and slashed. Bang! A ray of sword light slashed the black mark. Under their gazes, the black mark trembled violently before shattering. "It really can." All three of them were stunned. Xiaowen looked at Yi Xian. "Your sword is amazing." Yi Xian. Fan Duo said solemnly, "But I can't sense any changes." Xiaowen said, "Cultivate with me. It won't take long for us to escape this expanse of space." Fan Duo bowed slightly. "Thank you." Xiaowen gazed at Yi Xian. "I'll take her to Xiaota." Yi Xian nodded. "All right." Suddenly, a woman walked over from afar. "Me too." It was Si. Si walked over to Yi Xian. "Me too." Yi Xian was speechless. A short while later, Ce and Fan Duo entered Xiaota to cultivate. In the field, Yi Xian looked at the Qingxian sword in his hand. Could he create a lot of super powerhouses? The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly when he thought up to this point. After all, he lacked experts the most right now. With the Azure Sword he could raise the upper limits of countless experts. As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot, and he was in Pine Prefecture when he appeared again. After being busy for so long, it was time for him to get down to business. He was getting tired of fighting and killing every single day. It was better to hurry up and give birth to a child. Yi Xian arrived at the imperial palace. Tuoba Yen, who was busy, suddenly raised her head. She was overjoyed when she saw Yi Xian and she was about to stand up. However, Yi Xian had started to take off his clothes. Tuoba Yen was speechless. Chapter 1849. Without the threat of the ancient demons and the very ones, Yi Xian felt a sense of relief. In the following days he spent every day and night in the imperial palace, enjoying the indescribable pleasures. Of course he did not forget to cultivate. His current goal was to rely on his own ability to jump out of this current universe's space-time, not by cheating. In fact, he knew that he was lucky this time. If Tai Yixing Shui and Gu Ming had not gone to find his father, he would still be in a bad situation. After all, he, Shaoan, and Jingji could not kill Tai Yixing Shui and Gu Ming. Even with the Qingxian sword, his current power was only equivalent to a peak Divine Soul Realm elite. And now, compared to Jingji and Shaoan, the gap was even bigger. His goal now was to reach the Divine Persona stage. Create a Divine Persona. Inside Xiao Ta, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. Under Shaoan's guidance, he began to create a Divine Persona. Because of Shaoan's guidance, his cultivation was very fast. Shaoan and Zhang Wenxiu also reached the Divine Physique echelon under Shaoan's guidance. The two women also began to create a Divine Persona. The reason why the two women could progress so fast was because of Xiao Ta. 10 years inside was equivalent to 1 day outside. One had to admit that it was too heaven-defying. It should be said that Qing'er was too heaven-defying. Even Shaoan did not know how Qing'er did it. And Small Pagoda itself was even more stupefied. It only knew that it had become stronger. As for how it had become stronger, it did not know. No one knew how Qing'er did it. In Shaoan's words, the stronger he became, the more terrifying he felt Qing'er was. Somewhere in an unknown star region, a woman was slowly walking. This woman was the woman in the plain dress. The woman in the plain dress walked slowly, and the space in front of her was very strange because in some places the space was folded and in some places it was curved. After a few steps, the woman in the plain dress stopped. Not far from her stood a middle-aged man, the god-human. The middle-aged man held a folding fan in his hand that emitted streams of light. There was a kind smile on his face, and he looked very wise and refined. The middle-aged man sized up the woman in a simple dress and said with a smile, "Interesting. I never expected that a human would come here." The woman in the plain dress looked at the middle-aged man and didn't say anything. The middle-aged man said with smile, "My name is Boya, a great divine master of the god race. I'm not here to hurt you but because I'm curious. This is because when we created humans we placed a seal on you. This seal will restrict your growth. And now it seems that you have broken this seal. How did you do it?" The plainly dressed woman raised her hand and slashed with her sword. A sword pierced through the middle-aged man's forehead. Boya's expression froze. The plain-dressed woman slowly walked in front of Boya. She stared straight at Boya. "Celestial race? Human?" As she spoke, she shook her head with a trace of disappointment in her eyes. "So you're still thinking about your true form?" Hearing this, Boya's pupils shrank. What do you mean?" The plain-dressed woman looked at Boya. "According to your logic, in my eyes, you belong to a lower race and a lower civilization. Do you understand?" Boya stared at the plain-dressed woman. "You were created by us. What right do you have to say that the celestial race is a lower race?" The plain-dressed woman slowly walked into the distance. "Any life form has unlimited possibilities. Humans have spiritual intelligence, so humans have unlimited possibilities. As for saying that the celestial race is a lower race, that's because you're still focusing on other races. Celestial race? Humans? Demons? Beasts? In my eyes there are no races. Everyone is just a type of life form. Life forms are divided into strong and weak. According to your logic, you're all lower life forms in my eyes." Boya's eyes were somewhat blank. After a while his pupils shrank. You've already surpassed the essence of life." The plain-dressed woman stopped and turned to look at Boya. "You don't seem so stupid. But you're wrong again." Boya hurriedly asked, "What's wrong?" The plain-dressed woman said, "You're wrong because you're too stupid." Boya was speechless. The plain-dressed woman continued walking into the distance. Meanwhile, Boya's body had started to slowly become illusory. Boya suddenly said, "Then in your opinion, what kind of life form is terrifying?" The plain-dressed woman suddenly stopped. She fell silent for a long time before she said, "To me, there's nothing to be afraid of because I'm invincible." Boya ridiculed. "Invincible? In this world, no one can be truly invincible. Even the ancestor of the celestial race who created the human race doesn't dare say that he's invincible. What makes you think that you're invincible?" The woman in a simple dress spread open her right hand, and then she spun it lightly. In an instant, the space beneath her palm suddenly started trembling, and then countless mysterious substances converged together. In next to no time, a person had condensed into form under Boya's terrified gaze. It wasn't a human. It was a living celestial god. Moreover, it looked exactly like Boya. Most importantly, it was alive. It wasn't a puppet or some secret technique. Boya stared at the plain-dressed woman as if he was looking at a ghost. "You," the plain-dressed woman said, "is it difficult to create a race of life? It's not difficult. So long as you can understand the essence of life, then creating a life form is a very simple matter." As she spoke, she glanced at Boya. "If I want to, I can create a life form that's thousands of times stronger than the celestial race." Boya seemed as if he'd lost his soul. "You," the plain-dressed woman waved her right hand lightly, and the person she'd created was directly erased. "Creating life forms goes against ethics. I don't recommend it." As she spoke, she slowly closed her eyes. "I've spoken too much today. Do you know why I've spoken so much? Because..." At this point, she suddenly looked at Boya with an icy cold expression. "Because all of you have disappointed me. Why are all of you so weak? So weak that I don't even have the desire to kill all of you." Boya, the plain-dressed woman suddenly opened her palm. There was a small wooden figure in her hand that looked exactly like Yi Xian. Looking at the wooden figure in her hand, the plain-dressed woman smiled. "All of you should thank my big brother. Because if it wasn't for him, I would destroy everything I see." Boya's voice trembled. "Why?" The plain-dressed woman said, "Because you're too weak. I find it annoying." As she spoke, she'd already disappeared nearby. She was very indifferent to life because she'd already surpassed the essence of life. However, she also felt that life was very interesting. Because of Yi Xian. Because of Yi Xian's existence, she felt that life was interesting. Behind the plain-dressed woman, Boya became more and more illusory. His eyes were filled with confusion. The plain-dressed woman had overturned his understanding. In next to no time, Boya vanished on the spot. Completely disappeared. It didn't take long for an old man from the god clan to appear here, and he just stared at the spot where Boya had fallen. He was too late. The old man slowly closed his eyes. He was aware of Boya's strength. However, he didn't expect that the human could even kill Boya and erase him at that. Just how strong was that human woman? At this moment, a celestial race woman suddenly appeared. The woman wore a white robe. Her features were picturesque and she held an ancient book in her hand. The old man said softly, "That human strength is abnormal." The woman said indifferently, "I've told you long ago that keeping humans in captivity, in the words of the human race, is like raising a tiger. Now there are people who can jump out of the rules we set. In the future, there will be more and more humans who will jump out of the rules we set." As she spoke, she looked at the old man. "Patriarch, we should take advantage of the fact that the human race hasn't completely risen to power. We should directly wipe them out, lest they become a disaster for our celestial race." The old man was the patriarch of the celestial race, Mo Yen. After a long silence, Mo Yen said softly, "If we directly wipe them out, our celestial race will lose a lot of faith power." Humans cultivated the cultivation method given to them by the celestial race. However, they didn't know that all cultivators would produce faith power, and this faith power would eventually be fed back to the celestial race. Simply put, it was like humans rearing animals. After reaching a certain level, humans would eat these animals. At this moment, the woman suddenly said, "But as you can see, some humans can already jump out of the rules we set. This means that humans have grown to a certain level. If we allow them to continue to grow, it will become a disaster in the end. If we don't wipe them out while they are still weak, I'm afraid that once they grow in the future, they will become like that woman just now." Hearing this, Mo Yan's face darkened. Even Boya was killed. This meant that the human woman's strength had reached a very terrifying level. She might be just a little weaker than them. Once she came into contact with the celestial race's god civilization, she might become even stronger. Thinking of this, Mo Yan's eyes became cold. He looked at the woman and said, "Yi Yan, I'll leave this matter to you. Wipe out the human race." As Yi Yan had said, someone had already jumped out of the rules they set. This meant that there might be more people jumping out of the rules in the future. Once too many human experts jumped out of the rules, it would be a certain threat to the celestial race. They had to be on guard. Ian smiled and said, "All right. But how do you plan to deal with that woman?" Mo Yen looked into the distance. After looking for a long time, he said, "I can't feel her aura anymore. She must have used some special method to hide herself." Saying this, he turned to the side and said, "Search for this person with all your strength. If you find her, don't kill her. I want her alive. At the side, a voice sounded quietly. Understood. Chapter 1850. After Yi Yin left the God clan, she arrived at an unknown galaxy. She just arrived when an old man suddenly appeared in front of her. The old man bowed respectfully. Greetings, God. Yi Yin spoke indifferently. Annihilate the humans. Annihilate the humans? The old man was stunned. Yi Yin smiled. Didn't you hear me? The old man hurriedly said, I heard. God of Yi Yin, may I ask why you suddenly want to annihilate the humans? Yi Yin walked over to the old man and stared at him. Don't ask so many questions. Gather everyone here right now. The old man was shocked and he didn't dare ask any further questions. He bowed respectfully before turning around and leaving. It didn't take long for a few dozen human experts to appear in front of Yi Yin. These humans had been raised by the God clan to manage the humans. The Divine Gate. Using humans to manage humans. At this moment, all the human experts of the Divine Gate were gathered in front of Yi Yin, and all of them were extremely respectful. Yi Yin glanced at them and said, the God clan has decided to annihilate all humans. Of course, all of you are excluded. Because all of you have been loyal to the God clan, and we won't abandon all of you. I'll leave the task of annihilating the humans to all of you. Once it's done, all of you will follow me back to the God clan and come into contact with an even more powerful civilization. Annihilate the humans. All the human experts in the surroundings were stunned. Why are we suddenly annihilating the humans? Yi Yin glanced at them again and smiled. Is there a problem? One of the human experts bowed respectfully. My God, why are we suddenly annihilating? Yi Yin suddenly waved her right hand. Bang. The human expert who'd spoken was instantly obliterated. The remaining human experts were horrified when they witnessed this scene. Yi Yin smiled. Do whatever I tell you to do. Don't ask why. Understand? The other human experts hurriedly replied, yes. Yi Yin said, you can begin now. As for how to annihilate all the humans in the universe, think about it yourselves. I'll return in a month. I hope all humans will be completely annihilated by then. She turned around and left once she finished speaking. The human experts glanced at each other. Meanwhile, one of them suddenly looked at the old man who led the group. Elder Zhang, why did the God clan suddenly annihilate the humans? Elder Zhang shook his head. I don't know. The man frowned. Even Elder Zhang doesn't know? Elder Zhang said softly, do you still remember the swordsman who forced us to cast a soul for a human woman? Everyone nodded. They had a deep impression of that swordsman. That day he broke through the stone door with a single sword strike and almost killed Elder Zhang. A complicated look flashed in Elder Zhang's eyes. Among the humans, there are some who have broken the rules set by the Divine Clan. Because of this, the Divine Clan feels a little uneasy. Therefore, they want to destroy the humans they created. Some of the human powerhouses were puzzled. How did the green-robed swordsman escape their rules? Everyone looked at Elder Zhang. This was also what they were very confused about. Old Zhang shook his head. But what was certain was that someone had already jumped out. And if one person jumped out, it meant that many people could also jump out. So, the divine humans can't sit still anymore. A human powerhouse said in a deep voice, Elder Zhang, do we really want to destroy the humans? Elder Zhang said indifferently, if we don't destroy the humans, the Divine Clan will destroy us. Everyone was silent. Rebel against the Divine Clan? That was simply impossible. In front of the Divine Clan they were just like ants. Thinking of this, the human powerhouses sighed in their hearts. After cultivating for so many years, they also wanted to jump out of that circle. But no one could do it. Even Elder Zhang and Yi couldn't completely jump out. And they could reach this point today because of the Divine Clan's permission. Otherwise they would at most be at the Divine Soul Realm. They relied on the Divine Clan to survive. At this time Elder Zhang suddenly said, destroy. The rest of the humans, this chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. The powerhouses were silent. Obviously they agreed. In fact, they had no other choice. Either destroy the humans or be destroyed by the Divine Clan. Elder Zhang suddenly said, let's go. With that he turned and left. Everyone else followed closely behind. Inside Xiao Ta's room. At this moment Yi Xian was still forming his divine core. Because of Xiao En's guidance, everything was going smoothly. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. At this moment his body was undergoing a subtle change. Divine core. At this moment he was condensing his divine core. Once his divine core was formed, his strength would undergo a tremendous change. Most importantly, he might be able to open the sword Dao seal left behind by his father and big brother. That was the main point. 3 years later, Yi Xian, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, suddenly opened his eyes. Bang! A powerful aura swept out from his body, and the space around him boiled. Yi Xian pressed down lightly with his right hand, and the powerful aura instantly vanished without a trace. At the side, Shaoan sized up Yi Xian and said, "It's done." Yi Xian nodded. After years of bitter cultivation, he had finally condensed his divine core. At this moment, his body trembled slightly, and a sword howl resounded. Yi Xian was overjoyed. The sword Dao seal had been activated. Yi Xian first looked at the sword Dao seal left behind by his father. Just as he expected, this seal was the second part of the sword domain. The second part was called Core Sword Domain. It was also called Core Sword Domain. It could crush everything in Core Sword Domain. Main attack. Yi Xian couldn't wait to start cultivating. The more he cultivated, the more excited he became. Because he noticed that this Core Sword Domain wasn't just ordinarily terrifying. It was simply an extraordinary killer move. However, it consumed quite a lot of energy right now. However, its lethality was extremely great as well. In the following period of time, Yi Xian started to cultivate the Core Sword Domain like a madman. Besides that, he also strengthened his life and death draw and head snatch. After he reached the Divine Spark realm, his overall strength had also greatly increased. A few months later, Jingji suddenly arrived at Xiaota. Jingji gazed at Yi Xian and Shaoan with an extremely solemn expression. Something big has happened. Yi Xian frowned slightly. What's the matter? Jingji said solemnly, the spirit qi in the entire divine ancient star field has begun to dry up. Not only that, but countless dead spirits qi has appeared in the world for some unknown reason. The entire ancient divine world is rapidly dying. Not only the entire ancient divine world, but other places are also experiencing the same situation. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly. Other places? With that, his expression changed greatly and he left Xiaota. When he arrived at Qingzhou, his expression instantly darkened. The spirit qi in the entire Qingzhou was also rapidly drying up. Countless terrifying dead spirits qi spread between the heavens and earth. These dead spirits qi were frantically corroding the entire world. Yi Xian directly arrived at Tuoba Yan's palace. With a wave of his right hand, the dead spirits qi that was spreading towards the palace was instantly crushed. However, the next moment, countless more dead spirits qi appeared in the sky. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian couldn't help but frown. At this moment, Shaoan and Jingji appeared beside him. Yi Xian said solemnly, "Where did this dead spirit's qi come from?" Jingji shook his head. "I don't know. In any case, this dead spirit's qi has appeared in the entire universe." Yi Xian looked at Jingji. "The entire universe?" Jingji nodded. "The entire universe." Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. "It shouldn't be the work of the current experts in this universe. It should be done by someone outside." Jingji knew. Someone outside wants to destroy this universe. Yi Xian opened his eyes. Who could it be? Jingji shook his head. "I don't know. The situation is very serious. If we don't stop this dead spirit's qi, it will destroy the entire universe." Yi Xian looked at the dead spirit's qi and drew his sword to slash. A sword beam tore through the sky. In an instant, the dead spirit's qi in the entire sky was directly wiped out. However, after a while, countless dead spirits qi appeared again. Yi Xian directly flew out of this space. This chapter is not over. Please continue. There was a spacetime in the universe. When he arrived at another unknown spacetime, his face instantly darkened. This unknown spacetime was filled with endless dead spirits qi, and the dead spirits qi in the current universe had seeped through this spacetime. Meanwhile, Shaoan and Jingji appeared by his side. Their faces sank when they saw the dead spirits qi in this spacetime. Someone really wants to destroy the current universe. Who is it? Jingji looked at Yi Xian. What should we do? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Of course we have to stop it. If they didn't stop it, then the dead spirit's qi wouldn't just destroy Azure Prefecture, it would also destroy the 5th dimension and the 9th dimension. It was coming for this universe." Jingji suddenly said, "We have to deal with the dead spirit's qi at its source. Otherwise it will be endless." Yi Xian looked up into the depths of the starry sky. "Can't both of you sense that stone door?" Jingji nodded. Yi Xian said, "Can you make it come out?" Jingji was about to speak when a huge vortex suddenly appeared in the depths of the starry sky, and then a stone door slowly condensed. At the same time, an old man walked out from the stone door. This old man was Elder Zhang. Elder Zhang looked down at Yi Xian and the others and didn't speak. Jingji suddenly said, "You want to destroy that universe?" Elder Zhang said indifferently, "Yes." Jingji was slightly puzzled. "Why?" Elder Zhang said, "There's no need to explain to you." Jingji's face sank when she heard this and she looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment before he said, "There has to be a reason to destroy a universe, right?" "A reason?" Elder Zhang looked at Yi Xian. "Humans are weak so they deserve to die. Is this reason enough?" Yi Xian frowned when he heard this. Elder Zhang said, "Don't struggle pointlessly. This is the fate of all humans." As he spoke, his body gradually became illusory. At the same time, countless specks of necromancy energy started to spread out towards the universe outside. Yi Xian's expression became ferocious when he saw this. At this moment he thought of something. Something that happened when he was young with Qing. Why did he die in that cave all those years ago? It was because Tendo wanted to destroy the world. But why did Tendo want to destroy the world? Because all living beings were like ants in the eyes of Tendo. If you're weak, then who else should I bully? Being weak is wrong and being weak is a sin. Just like at this moment, these people want to destroy the entire human race, and the reason is that humans are weak so they deserve to die. How unfair is this world? When he thought of this, Yi Xian was stunned. At this moment, he seemed to see the helpless and despairing gazes of countless people, just like how he and Qing'e looked in that cave all those years ago. His heart. What was his heart all those years ago? He wanted Qing'e to become stronger, then kill Tendo and help the weak. Because he and Qing'e used to be very weak. If someone had stood up against Tendo back then, he and Qing'e would not have ended up like that. But now he only thought of himself, his family and friends. Was he wrong? He was not wrong. He really did not have the obligation to save the world. He could bring all his family and friends into Xiaota's body, and then let the universe be destroyed. But if that was the case, how many people would be as helpless and despairing as he and Qing'e had been in the past? Back then he and Qing'e had hoped so much that someone would stand up against Tendo, but there was no one. When he thought of this, Yi Xian took a step forward and directly displayed his sword domain. With the help of the Qingxian sword, his sword domain directly enveloped this unknown space-time, and the necromancy energy was temporarily suppressed by his sword domain. Almost instantly, his face turned as pale as a sheet. Protect. Invincible sword domain. He did not know if he could save this current universe, but he only wanted to help this current universe and fight for this current universe with countless living beings. End of this chapter. Chapter 1851. The sword domain enveloped this unknown expanse of space and suppressed the necro energy. However, there was truly too much of it. It wasn't something he could endure right now. He would be dead by now if it wasn't for the green profound sword. The might of the green profound sword had sustained his sword domain and soul. Elder Zhang's eyes narrowed and he was quite shocked. He hadn't expected that the young man before him would actually be able to suppress the necro energy. As far as he was concerned, it was utterly impossible. As if he'd thought of something, he suddenly gazed at the green profound sword in Yi Xian's hand. When he saw the azure profound sword, his brows furrowed. This sword made him feel somewhat uneasy. Meanwhile, an old man appeared in front of Elder Zhang, and he gazed at Yi Xian. "Elder Zhang, this young man isn't simple at all." Elder Zhang nodded. "That sword in his hand is even more extraordinary." The old man spoke in a low voice. "He can't be allowed to suppress the necro energy." Elder Zhang nodded, and then he slowly pressed his right hand down, causing a powerful force to sweep towards Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Shaoan suddenly appeared above Yi Xian, and then she raised her hands. In an instant, a golden shield appeared above her. Rumble. The golden round shield trembled violently and then it cracked. Shaoan plummeted straight down. Elder Zhang gazed at Shaoan. "It's you." He naturally recognized Shaoan because it was they who'd helped her refine her radiant soul. Shaoan wiped off the blood on the corner of her mouth, and then she looked up at Elder Zhang. Elder Zhang spoke in a low voice. "Young miss, if you're willing then you can join my divine door. If you're willing then you can be spared from death." Shaoan had the qualifications to join the divine door. Moreover, the mysterious green-clothed swordsman was standing behind Shaoan, and that was something he was quite fearful of. Shaoan shook her head when she heard Elder Zhang, and then she glanced at Yi Xian. "I'll go with him." "Go with him." Hearing this, Elder Zhang furrowed his brows. "Going against the God clan will only lead to death." Shaoan replied, "It's fine." Elder Zhang shook his head. "Kill him." Even though he was afraid of the man in green, he was even more afraid of the God tribe. Compared to the God race, the green-robed man was just a slightly stronger human. What was he worth? Hearing old man Zhang's words, a few super experts suddenly flew out from the stone door and headed straight for Xiaoan. Xiaoan looked at the super experts charging at her with a calm expression. She slowly clenched her right hand, and in the next moment she suddenly turned into a beam of golden light and shot into the sky. Rumble. As the golden light shattered, Xiaoan fell straight from the sky. In front of the stone door, old Zhang looked at the falling Xiaoan and said indifferently, "You have only just reached the bright soul stage, you are not our match. I will now give you one last chance. If you are willing to enter my divine gate, I can spare your life." Down below, Xiaoan wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. Her body had already split open. His injuries were severe. Xiaoan shook his head. Again? She was about to launch another attack. However, at this moment Yi Xian suddenly said, "Wait." Xiaoan looked at Yi Xian and Yi Xian grinned. His smile was slightly pale. "I want to protect this universe. How can I drag you down?" Xiaoan looked at Yi Xian. "You protect this universe and I will protect you." Yi Xian was stunned and then he smiled. "We both have to live well." What? In the sky, Elder Zhang suddenly spoke indifferently. "Young man, you are indeed extraordinary to be able to utilize the sword domain to suppress the necromancy energy. But do you know what you are facing? You won't know." Yi Xian suddenly looked at Xiaoan and smiled. "They all say that I am the second generation." "Xiaoan, this chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page," Xiaoan replied with a question. "Aren't you?" Yi Xian's face darkened. "Give me some face." Xiaoan nodded. "I take back what I said." Yi Xian was speechless. In front of the stone door, Elder Zhang looked at Yi Xian. "It sounds like you are going to call for help." Yi Xian smiled. "Of course." As he spoke, he gazed at the green profound sword in his hand and spoke softly, "Qing I want to save this universe. Help me." Yi Xian wasn't a pedantic person. Save the universe? He wanted to. But he didn't have the ability. Since he didn't have the ability, he naturally wouldn't force it. Moreover, he would even bring his woman along. He wasn't an idiot. In the sky, Elder Zhang looked at Yi Xian. "I'll be waiting." In an unknown star region, a woman in a plain dress suddenly stopped. She fell silent for a moment before she said, "All right." As she spoke, she pressed her fingers together. The green profound sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly shot into the sky. In an instant, the dead spirit's aura around Yi Xian was cut into pieces by the green profound sword. With one strike, all the dead spirit's aura was gone. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. Qing could really hear him? In fact, he was just testing it out. He didn't expect Qing could really hear him. Qing had been watching him all this time? Thinking of this, Yi Xian felt a warm current in his heart. In the sky, Elder Zhang and the others were completely dumbfounded. Gone? With one strike, all the dead spirit's aura was gone? As if thinking of something, Elder Zhang looked at Yi Xian and stared at Yi Xian. "Who the hell are you?" Yi Xian looked at Elder Zhang. "The divine race's ancestor." "Bullshit." Elder Zhang said angrily. "You're a human, how can you be the divine race's ancestor? Who are you trying to fool?" Yi Xian said indifferently. "Then who do you think I am?" Mr. Zhang stared at Yi Xian. At this moment he was panicking. That strike just now was not from Yi Xian, it was from someone secretly controlling it. But he couldn't feel anything. What did this mean? It meant that the person who did it was far stronger than him. Was it a human or a divine race? Or the green-robed man? The green-robed man. At this thought, Elder Zhang was sure. Only that human man had this kind of strength. Elder Zhang looked around, his eyes filled with fear. That day, his soul was almost destroyed by the green-robed man. Elder Zhang looked coldly at Yi Xian. "Let's go." Then he and the others turned and entered the stone door. The stone door closed. Below, Yi Xian looked at the green profound sword. At this moment, the green profound sword trembled slightly and landed in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian held the green profound sword in silence. In another unknown starfield, the woman in a plain dress continued walking into the distance. Save the universe? She really had no interest in that. Perhaps in the beginning she might have. But she didn't. The reason she did it was because of Yi Xian. Similarly, if Yi Xian needed it, he could just say the word and she would destroy the entire universe. To her, life was just a formality, a dispensable formality. Of course, except for Yi Xian. This chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. At this moment, the woman in the plain dress suddenly stopped. She looked into the distance and saw a woman standing there. When the woman saw the woman in a plain dress, she was slightly stunned and then she smiled. What a coincidence! The woman in a plain dress nodded slightly as a greeting. The woman in front of her was none other than Moon Yin. Moon Yin smiled. I snuck up here. But you probably forced your way up here, right? The woman in a plain dress nodded. Moon Yin said, How is he? The woman in a plain dress gazed at Moon Yin. I'm a little busy. Obviously she didn't want to talk anymore. If it wasn't for Moon Yin, she wouldn't have said a word. She would still give Moon Yin some face. Moon Yin smiled. I won't disturb you anymore. The woman in a plain dress nodded slightly, and then she walked off into the distance. But she stopped after a few steps and then she said, You probably want to ask me something. Go ahead. Moon Yin said, The God race created humans. In other words, they've grasped the essence of life, right? The woman in a plain dress nodded, Yes. Moon Yin spoke in a low voice, I've been researching the essence of life recently, but I've noticed some problems. The essence of life is made up of matter, but where does that matter come from? In other words, what was the beginning of life? For example, the first living thing. The origin of life. That was what she'd been researching recently. The woman glanced at Moon Yin, and then she opened her palm. There was a drop of water there and it gradually froze into ice. But it didn't take long for the ice to transform into a drop of water. Moon Yin remained silent for a long time and then she said, I understand. The woman in a plain dress nodded slightly, Smart. Moon Yin had a slightly complicated expression on her face. The woman walked off into the distance. Meanwhile, Moon Yin said, One last question. The woman gazed at Moon Yin. Moon Yin opened her palm, and an ancient book appeared there. She didn't ask and she just looked at the woman because she knew that the woman in a plain dress knew what she meant. The woman in a plain dress fell silent for a short while and then she said, You're very outstanding, but there are some things that you have to pretend you don't know. Because you'll vanish with a single thought. Understand? Moon Yin spoke in a low voice, I know. But is there any meaning to our lives? The woman nodded, There is. Moreover. Then she sneered, Some people think that he's a chess player but they don't know that he's just a chess piece. Then she glanced at the ancient book in Moon Yin's hand, Do you understand? Moon Yin didn't say anything. The woman in a plain dress turned and walked away. This universe is just a cycle and the so-called Tao is just a cycle. A person who draws circles for others doesn't know that he's also in someone else's circle. In short, I'm invincible. Moon Yin looked at the woman in a plain dress disappearing into the distance, and her expression was complicated. What a terrifying woman. Such a deep mind was rarely seen in history. After a while, Moon Yin put away the ancient book, smiled and turned to leave. Somewhere in a stone hall. Old Zhang stood respectfully in front of Yi Yen. Yi Yen looked at old Zhang. You said it was the green-robed man? Old Zhang said in a low voice, It should be him. He's very strong and I'm afraid I'm no match for him. Yi Yen said indifferently, Leave this person to the divine race. Then she got up and the next moment she had returned to the divine race. After a while, the divine race began to list the green-robed man as wanted. End of this chapter. Chapter 1852. The God Clan. In the middle of a starfield, there was a tower that was thousands of feet tall. The Tower of Gods. The Tower of Gods had a total of 1,000 levels, and every single level represented a world. Just this single pagoda contained over 1,000 worlds within it. Moreover, there were countless spatial passageways around the pagoda, and endless energy of faith and pure spirit energy flowed ceaselessly through these spatial passageways into the various levels of the pagoda. The top-rate experts of the God Clan were gathered within a hall. Mo Yen, who sat at the seat of the host, glanced at them, and then he said, I know that two of them have broken through the rules we set. The first is that woman in a plain dress. She killed Bo Ya, and it proves that her strength has exceeded the limits of humans and even surpassed some of our gods. The second is that man in green clothes. His strength is unknown but he shouldn't be too weak. Hearing this, all the gods in the hall furrowed their brows. Humans were created by the gods. Every single human had a seal placed on them since birth. It wasn't just humans, even the entire universe had a seal and restriction. Without the help of the God Clan, the soul realm was the limit of humans. Yet now, someone had actually broken through this limit without relying on the God Clan. Suddenly, a woman smiled and said, I think it might not be a bad thing. All the gods gazed at her when they heard this. The person who spoke was Yen Ji, and he was a grand instructor of the God Clan's God Institute. Yen Ji smiled, I know what all of you are worried about, but have all of you thought about why they were able to break through the rules we set? All the gods frowned when they heard this. Right. Why were they able to break through the rules we set? That's not normal. Yanji continued, since they were able to break through our rules, it means that they've grasped another path of cultivation, a path that even we don't know about. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly as she spoke. So, as far as I'm concerned, it isn't a bad thing and it's actually a good thing. It's an extremely good thing because it means that we might be able to establish a new path of cultivation. Mo Yen said, both of them really do possess extremely high research value. Yanji hurriedly said, Patriarch, they must be kept alive. Only when they're alive would they have research value. Mo Yen was about to speak when an extremely old man spoke abruptly, I'm slightly uneasy. Hearing this, everyone looked at the old man. This elder's name was Yen Zhu, and he was the great elder of the divine human race. Mo Yen smiled and said, Elder Yen Zhu, please speak. Yen Zhu said, at present I don't even know the specific situation of these two people. Their strength is also just our conjecture. Has anyone thought about what if their strength is different from what we have guessed, or even much stronger than what we have guessed? The middle-aged man called Yu Qin nodded slightly, no problem. Mo Yen said, to prevent any unforeseen circumstances, I'll allow you to mobilize 6 divine generals. Yu Qin said indifferently, no need. They're just 2 humans. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Mo Yen shook his head, this fellow is still so arrogant. Meanwhile, Yanji spoke abruptly, I want to make a trip to the human universe. Mo Yen looked at Yanji, the human universe? Yanji nodded and smiled, I wasn't interested in them in the past but now I am. I want to take a few students to the human universe and come into contact with them. Mo Yen thought for a moment and nodded, up to you. Yanji turned around and left. It didn't take long for all the experts to disperse. Not long after, Yanji brought the 3 God race students to the human universe. But at this moment they were in human form. Somewhere in the starry sky, Yanji looked down and smiled, I've studied humans in the past. As lowly beings, although they're weak, they're very interesting. Because they possess a so-called human nature. A woman in a white dress by Yanji's side was slightly curious. Instructor Yanji, what is human nature? Yanji smiled, Qin Shui, you're making things difficult for me. Because human nature is the most complicated thing about humans, and it can't be explained in a few words. A man by the side said indifferently, Instructor, what's there to study about these ants? Yanji glanced at the man and smiled, Mu, although humans are weak, they still have some outstanding aspects. Let's go. With that, she vanished with the 2 of them. Inside the Xiaota, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground with the azure profound sword in front of him. And around him there was an extremely terrifying power. Sword domain. Sword domain just now. During this period of time he had been madly cultivating the square sword domain, using the azure profound sword to establish a sword domain. It could destroy everything in the square sword. After the dead spirit chi from before, the current universe was in a state of panic. Although the previous destruction of the world didn't succeed, many people died. Now the current universe was in a mess. The main reason was that the people's hearts were in chaos. The order of the entire universe collapsed, and the evil side of human nature was completely exposed. At this moment, Jingji suddenly appeared in Yi Xian's Xiaota. When he saw the power of the sword domain around Yi Xian, Jingji's expression instantly became incomparably solemn. At this moment, Yi Xian gave him a very dangerous feeling. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly looked at Jingji, what's wrong? Jingji said in a deep voice, the current universe is very chaotic, and many places have lost their original order. Moreover, there are rumors that the end of the world is coming, and the universe is going to be destroyed. Hearing this, Yi Xian frowned. Jingji looked at Yi Xian, are you going to do something about it? She knew that in this universe only Yi Xian had the strength to do something about it. If Yi Xian didn't do anything, then humans wouldn't even need to wait for the God race to act, as humans would play themselves to death. Most of the time humans were very united, but most of the time humans were the most ferocious when they killed each other. Yi Xian shook his head, the universe is too big. How can I do anything about it? How big was the current universe? Manage the entire universe? Even if he wanted to, he didn't have the ability. He didn't have enough manpower. Jingji said in a deep voice, now there are rumors that the universe is going to end. Many people think that since they are going to die anyway, why not go crazy? Therefore many places outside, especially those small places, are in chaos. Yi Xian looked at Jingji, what do you think? Jingji knew, if you want to do something, I have a way. If you don't want to do something, then you can only let the chaos outside. Yi Xian didn't say anything. Jingji said again, I think you have to do something. Yi Xian asked, why? Jingji looked at Yi Xian, now is not a problem of human civil strife, but a war between races. The god race wants to destroy us. But now humans need someone to carry the flag. If no one comes out to carry this flag, the entire human race will be at a loss. As for us humans, we can only let the god race slaughter us. This is the end of humanity. If you want to save the human race, you must stand up and carry the flag. Call on all humans to fight against the divine race. Yi Xian shook his head. I know you're right, but the humans' current strength is not enough to fight against the god clan. Jingji frowned slightly. Why can't we fight against the god race? We have a green-robed man and a plain-dressed woman. I know that you don't want to rely on your father or your sister, but what is the purpose of the god race? Exterminate the entire human race? And they are humans, right? As she said that, she looked at Yi Xian and said seriously, I can testify for you. It was the god-human race that didn't care about martial ethics first. Don't have any other psychological burden. Fight them first. If you can't beat them, make yourself look worse. It's best if you break an arm or a leg. Then I'll take your severed limbs to inform your father and sister. The effect will definitely be great. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 1853. Jingji knew that the plain-dressed woman and the green-robed man might not care about this current universe, but they would definitely care about Yi Xian. If they saw Yi Xian crippled, the two of them would definitely not stand by and do nothing. Especially the woman in the plain dress. At the thought of the woman in the plain dress seeing Yi Xian's severed limbs, she felt very excited. That woman must have slaughtered the entire divine race. Upon hearing Jingji's words, Yi Xian was somewhat speechless. Damn it. This woman was not only scheming against him, but she was also scheming against his father and Qing'er. Too evil. At this moment, Jingji suddenly sighed in a low voice. Come with me to take a look outside. Without waiting for Yi Xian to refuse, she directly grabbed Yi Xian's arm and left Xiaota. The two of them immediately appeared in the divine ancient star field. Under Jingji's lead, the two of them came to a small city. As soon as they entered the city, Yi Xian furrowed his brows. Inside the city there were endless screams. Yi Xian glanced around. At this moment, the entire city was in chaos. Burning, killing, raping. The whole city was like hell on earth. As for those weaklings without strength, it was even more tragic to look at. The dark side of human nature was on full display. Beside Yi Xian, Jingji said softly, there are many places like this in the universe. Some powerful people and powerful forces could protect themselves, but who would care about those weaker people? They can only wait to be slaughtered. Yi Xian said nothing. Jingnu, why did you suppress the dead spirit qi all by yourself? In fact, she was very curious about this point. Based on her understanding of Yi Xian was not a saint, and Yi Xian was not the kind of person who wanted to be a hero. However, at that time Yi Xian still stood out. Yi Xian said softly, because I thought of me and Qing'er. At that time she and I were helpless. Jingji looked into the distance and said, what you were in the past is what they are now. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. We cannot avoid a battle with the God clan. Yi Xian smiled and said, indeed. As he spoke, he opened his palm and Xiaota appeared within it. In the next moment, all the experts of the Sword Alliance appeared here. Yi Xian looked at the leading sword Jew. From now on, the order of this universe will be maintained by my Sword Alliance. First, send an order to all the realms. Everyone must obey the orders set by the Sword Alliance. Anyone who dares to cause trouble will be killed. Sword Jew glanced at Yi Xian. We might not have enough manpower. Yi Xian said, ask the All-Heaven City and the Undying Emperor clan of the nine-dimensional cosmos for help. Then he looked at Xiaota. Supreme Fan Duo and Supreme Feng Yi. The two women appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at the two women. I need your help. The two of them were very powerful. With the help of these two women, there was still a great chance of restoring the order of this universe. The two women nodded, turned around and left. Yi Xian looked at Jingji. Jingji said, the people of the Templar Church will be at your command. Yi Xian nodded. Have your people assist the Sword Alliance. At the same time, inform the entire human race about the God clan. Hearing this, Jingji frowned slightly. Won't this cause greater panic? Yi Xian said, it has already reached the bottom. Jingji understood when he heard this. If the humans knew that there was a stronger race that wanted to destroy them, what would they do? If no one took the lead, there would definitely be chaos. But what if someone took the lead? Humans killed each other, but at the same time they were a very united race. Because if they were not united, they would die. Sword Ju and the others immediately left for the realms. Jingji looked at Yi Xian. What do you plan to do next? Yi Xian said with a smile. What else can I plan to do? Of course it's to fight the God clan. Jingji said in a low voice. We know nothing about the God clan. Yi Xian raised his head and looked into the depths of the starry sky. He said softly, we will know soon. At this moment he suddenly frowned. He turned his head and looked into the distance. There were 3 people standing there. 2 women and a man. When he saw the 3 people, Jingji, who was beside Yi Xian, frowned. These 3 people were Yanji's group of 3. At this moment, Yanji's group of 3 were sizing up Yi Xian. They didn't meet by chance. They had come to look for Yi Xian. Because in this universe, Yi Xian was the most famous. At this moment, Yanji suddenly smiled and said, Young Master Yi, hello. My name is Yanji. These 2 beside me are my students. Amu and Qin Shui. Yi Xian nodded slightly. He sized up the 3 of them and a trace of bewilderment flashed through his eyes. Meanwhile, the green profound sword in his hand suddenly trembled. When he sensed this scene, a trace of vigilance arose in Yi Xian's heart. Yanji led the 2 of them to stand before Yi Xian, and then she smiled lightly. Young Master Yi, can I have a look at the sword in your hand? Obviously, she'd noticed the green profound sword in Yi Xian's hand. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. I'm afraid not. Meanwhile, Amu suddenly spoke coldly. You don't know how to appreciate favors. As soon as he finished speaking, he flicked his sleeve, and a powerful force smashed down towards Yi Xian. He attacked at the slightest disagreement. Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and slashed. A strand of sword light tore through the sky, and Amu's head flew into the air before he could even react. He was instantly killed. He died at the slightest disagreement. The smile on Yanji's face froze when he saw this scene. Shock. She hadn't expected that Yi Xian's strength would actually be so terrifying to the point of instantly killing her student with a single strike of his sword. This human isn't as weak as I thought he was. At this moment she understood a principle as well. The human race as a whole was weaker than the divine race. However, there were top-rate experts amongst the human race, and ordinary divine race experts were unable to go against these top-rate experts. Yanji looked at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi killed someone at the slightest disagreement. Isn't that going a bit too far? Yi Xian said with a smile. Who started it? Yanji fell silent. Yi Xian continued. Miss Yanji, what happened earlier was a misunderstanding. Let's get to know each other again. I'm Yi Xian, the reincarnation of the divine race's ancestor. The expressions of Yanji and Qin Shui froze when they heard this. The reincarnation of the divine race's ancestor? Jingji's face instantly sank when he noticed the subtle changes in their expressions. These 2 people are really from the divine race. The reason Yi Xian said those words wasn't because he was bored, but because he wanted to test these 2 people. But now it seemed like they really were from the divine race. When she thought of this, she glanced at Yi Xian. This man is really scheming. However, Yi Xian's expression didn't change at all, and he still had a smile on his face. Yanji looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Young Master Yi is the reincarnation of the divine race's ancestor? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Yanji blinked. What proof do you have? Yi Xian smiled. It's fine. If Miss doesn't believe it, then I'm not. In any case, it's fine as long as I believe it myself. Yanji was speechless. Qin Shui suddenly said, Young Master Yi, I heard that the divine race wants to annihilate the human race. As the reincarnation of the divine race's ancestor, what do you think about this? Yi Xian thought for a moment and then sighed. I never thought that my descendants would do such a cruel and inhumane thing. If I had known earlier, I would have castrated myself. The 3 women were speechless. Yi Xian suddenly looked at Yanji and smiled. Miss Yanji, what do you think about the divine race annihilating the human race? Yanji blinked and then said, What do you think about humans raising livestock to eat? Yi Xian was silent. Yanji smiled. You just said that the divine race annihilating the human race is cruel and inhumane. Then I would like to ask young Master Yi, humans eating livestock and enslaving other living beings, what does that mean? Yi Xian smiled slightly. I am a human. Yanji looked at Yi Xian and the corners of his mouth curled up. So, young Master Yi is a double standard. Humans raising livestock to eat and enslaving other living beings, young Master Yi said that he is a human. But the divine race annihilating the human race, Young Master Yi said that it is cruel and inhumane. Saying that, she shook her head and smiled. Young Master Yi, double standard is not good. Yi Xian smiled, it's a matter of strength. Yanji smiled and said, Mr. Yi hit the mark. Actually, we don't need to talk about benevolence and morality. In the end, it's a matter of strength. The reason why humans can raise livestock to eat and enslave other living beings is because humans are strong. As for the reason why the divine race wants to annihilate the human race, that's not important. What's important is that the divine race is stronger than humans. What do you think? Yi Xian smiled slightly. Indeed, if we fall behind, we will be beaten. Humans are weak now, so it's normal for them to be beaten. I'm very open about this. A trace of astonishment flashed across Yanji and Yanji's eyes. I originally thought that young Master Yi still wanted to talk about benevolence and morality with me. Yi Xian laughed. Miss Yanji, I'm a little curious. Why do you think the divine race suddenly wants to annihilate the human race? Jingji also looked at Yanji. She was also very curious. Why did the divine race suddenly want to annihilate the human race? Something must have happened. Yanji blinked and smiled. Young Master Yi, I'm not from the divine race, so how would I know why they want to annihilate the human race? Yi Xian smiled. That's true. Yanji looked at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. Young Master Yi, can I take a look at this sword? Just take a look. Yi Xian handed the sword to Yanji. Yanji took the sword, and very quickly, the smile on her face gradually disappeared and was replaced with solemnity. A moment later, Yanji looked at Yi Xian. Who made this sword? Yi Xian smiled. I made it myself. Yanji was stunned, then said, Young Master Yi, do I look like an idiot to you? Yi Xian. Yanji looked at the green profound sword again. A moment later, she said in a deep voice, Young Master Yi, the person who made this sword is not simple. As she said that, she glanced at Yi Xian. At this moment, a trace of uneasiness suddenly rose in her heart. Because she couldn't completely see through this sword. Some of the knowledge contained in this sword was something she had never come into contact with before. If it was really made by a human, then this human was too terrifying. Yi Xian suddenly said with a smile, I brought them from the God-Human clan. Yanji frowned slightly. Really? Yi Xian nodded. It was really made by the divine race. Yanji stared at Yi Xian in silence. If it was really made by the divine race, then it made sense. However, she still didn't believe it. Yi Xian suddenly said, I can swear on my character that it's not a lie. Swear on my character. Yanji hesitated for a moment, then said, That's too serious. I believe in young Master Ye's words. She had studied humans before, so she knew that humans paid great attention to character. Since this human in front of her had sworn on his character, then it should be true. Chapter 1854. Made by the celestial race? Yanji fell into deep thought. If it was made by the celestial race, then it meant that someone from the celestial race had come down to help the humans. And it wasn't an ordinary person. Who was it? For a time, countless celestial race experts flashed through Yanji's mind. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and the cyan profound sword appeared in his hand. He smiled and said, Miss Yanji, I still have something to do, farewell. After saying that, he turned and left. Yanji glanced at Yi Xian, who was leaving in the distance, and kept silent. At this moment, Qin Shui suddenly said, Mentor, do you really believe that the sword was made by the celestial race? Yanji said solemnly, This sword's mysteries are endless. The Tao of time and space contained within is far beyond this universe. Not only that, even I can't see through some of it. This sword shouldn't have been made by humans. Qin Shui frowned slightly. Then who could it be? Yanji said softly, I don't know. But it's definitely not an ordinary celestial race. But what is the other party's intention? To support the humans? As she said that, she frowned. Qin Shui suddenly asked, Mentor, could it be that Yi Xian is lying? Yanji said, It shouldn't be, right? That person swore on his character. Moreover, that sword is definitely not made by humans. Qin Shui said solemnly, Then what should we do now? Yanji said, You return to the celestial race first and inform the patriarch of this matter. I'll stay here and observe. Qin Shui nodded, Okay. After saying that, she turned and disappeared into the horizon. Yanji looked into the distance and disappeared on the spot. On the other side, Jingji looked at Yi Xian. They are from the celestial race. Yi Xian nodded. Jingji said solemnly, Why not kill them? Yi Xian smiled, Is there any use in killing them? Jingji said, That's true. Yi Xian looked around and said, Unknowingly, Yi Xian had become the flag-bearer of the human race. As he said that, he shook his head and smiled. It's like a dream. Do you regret it? Jingji asked with a smile. Yi Xian shook his head. As you said, we will have to fight the god race eventually, right? Jingji looked up into the depths of the starry sky. Do you know? In the past, we always wanted to leave this current universe and see the universe outside. However, when we were finally able to leave this place, we discovered that the outside world was filled with malicious intent towards us. Curious. Most of the time, human curiosity could kill humans. Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, a giant stone gate suddenly appeared above their heads. The divine gate. The stone door opened slowly and a terrifying pressure swept down. Then an old man walked out. Old Zhang. After Elder Zhang appeared, he looked at Yi Xian and said, "You can't protect humanity." Yi Xian smiled and said, "You seem to be a human too." Elder Zhang said, "I'm different from you." Yi Xian was puzzled. "What's different?" Old Zhang said, "I can become a god. After the humans are annihilated, the members of the divine gate will head to the god domain. There, we can accept a divine Tao civilization. A civilization that far surpasses humanity. God domain." Yi Xian frowned. At this moment, Elder Zhang suddenly said, "I originally wanted to give all humans a peaceful death, but since you're the patriarch, then don't blame us for being inhumane." As soon as he finished speaking, the surrounding space suddenly trembled. In the next moment, the space around them started to crack and then the space around them started to burn. It should be said that the entire universe started to burn. Seeing this, Yi Xian said solemnly, "There should be an array formation enveloping our current universe. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to destroy this universe at will." Jingji nodded. "It should be." Yi Xian looked at the stone door. "It's behind that stone door." Jingji was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword. A ray of sword light shot into the sky and slashed at Elder Zhang, who was in front of the stone door. When he saw Yi Xian charging over with his sword in hand, Elder Zhang slowly pressed his right hand down, and then an enormous palm descended from the sky. Rumble. The space above Yi Xian instantly became illusory. Yi Xian suddenly roared furiously, "Slash!" Bang! The sword light directly slashed the palm print. In an instant, the palm print was directly shattered, turning into countless streams of light that shot out. At the same time, Yi Xian, who was holding the sword, had already rushed in front of Mr. Zhang. He slashed his sword down. Elder Zhang was just about to attack when his expression changed drastically because a mysterious force had enveloped him. Sword domain. That was the sword domain from before. At the instant that Yi Xian's sword descended, an expanse of light instantly enveloped him and Elder Zhang. Just now, everything had been destroyed. Bang! An explosion resounded, and then a soul suddenly flew out from within the expanse of light. It was Elder Zhang. In that instant just now, his body had been blasted into pieces. Even though his soul had escaped, it was almost translucent as well. A single sword strike had almost obliterated him. Elder Zhang looked at Yi Xian in disbelief. "You?" At this moment, the sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly flew out. Elder Zhang didn't even have time to react before the soul-subduing sword pierced through his forehead. Bang! Elder Zhang's soul was directly absorbed. After absorbing Elder Zhang's soul, the azure profound sword trembled slightly. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the azure profound sword returned to his hand. At this moment, his face was slightly pale. Executing the core sword domain consumed too much energy. In fact, he hadn't fully grasped the core sword domain. He'd grasped 80% of it at most. Because the core sword domain relied entirely on his own comprehension. If it wasn't for the azure profound sword, even if he executed the core sword domain, it would be difficult for him to kill Elder Zhang. Elder Zhang's strength was extraordinarily terrifying. In the dark, Yanji took a deep look at Yi Xian. She hadn't expected that Yi Xian would actually be able to kill Elder Zhang with a single sword strike. After all, Elder Zhang's cultivation far surpassed Yi Xian's. Yanji gazed at the azure profound sword in Yi Xian's hand. A large part of the reason Yi Xian was able to surmount his realm and kill Elder Zhang was because of the sword domain and the sword he just executed. She was even more curious about the sword. In the distance, Yi Xian suddenly walked towards the stone door. Meanwhile, a group of experts suddenly surged out from within the stone door. All of them were extraordinary experts from the divine door. Yi Xian's face fell when he witnessed this scene. There were quite a few of them. Meanwhile, Shaoan and Jingji appeared by Yi Xian's side. At the same time, there was a white-haired old man. Yi Xian was stunned when he saw the white-haired old man. He'd seen this person in the past. It was the old man that played chess with Qing. Why is he here? Yi Xian gazed at the old man and the old man smiled embarrassedly. Young Master Yi. Yi Xian smiled. What are you doing here, senior? The old man replied, I heard young Master Yi was calling for me, so how could I not come? Yi Xian was just about to speak when the old man continued, after parting ways with senior that day, I gained some comprehension after returning. I never expected that I'd advance a step further. Yi Xian sized up the old man. The old man really was much stronger than before. This old man is amazing. He actually improved after being beaten up by Qing'er? The white-haired old man gazed at the experts from the divine door in the distance and spoke solemnly, Young Master Yi, these people aren't simple. Yi Xian nodded, they're from the God's Folk clan, and they intend to destroy our universe and all humans. The white-haired old man frowned, do they really intend to destroy all humans? Yi Xian nodded. The white-haired old man's face fell, an even more powerful clan? Yi Xian nodded, I've never heard of the God's Folk clan before, but from the looks of it now, they're definitely stronger than humans. The white-haired old man's eyes were filled with worry. He seemed to have thought of something and looked at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, is your sister a human? Yi Xian nodded, of course Qing'er is a human. Why do you ask, senior? The white-haired old man laughed, she's a human. If she's a human then I won't panic. He was afraid that the woman in the plain dress was from the God's Folk clan. If that's the case then what's the point of fighting? Just surrender. But since the woman in the plain dress is a human, then what's there to be afraid of? Hearing the white-haired old man's words, Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He looked at the experts from the divine door in the distance. Senior, I need you to help me stop these people. The white-haired old man immediately shook his head. Young friend, we can't stop them. These people's realms were higher than theirs and they outnumbered them. It was unrealistic for the three of them to stop a few dozen people. Shaoan suddenly said, I can. Jingji glared at Shaoan, you can my A**s. She finally realized that because of Yi Xian, Shaoan was almost talking without thinking. 3 people to stop a few dozen people? That was impossible. Not to mention the 3 of them, even if Yi Xian joined in, they still wouldn't be able to stop them. Yi Xian suddenly turned his head and looked down. Countless flames were constantly pouring into this universe. In at most an hour, these flames would be able to devour the entire universe. He didn't have much time. He had to enter the stone door and destroy the array. At this time an old man from the divine door looked at Yi Xian. You want to save humanity? That's simply wishful thinking. Yi Xian looked at the old man. You are also humans. The God's Folk clan wants to destroy the entire human race. Could it be that you, the old man sneered, humans? Once we destroy you we can go to the God realm. The God's Folk clan will help us leave our human bodies and souls. At that time, we will come into contact with the divine Tao civilization and cultivate more advanced martial arts. Yi Xian was speechless when he heard this. Right at this moment, the old man suddenly sneered and said, Human, don't you like to call for help? Come on, call for help. Yi Xian frowned slightly. What do you mean I like to call for help? The old man ridiculed. Didn't you save the human race by calling for help? However, I can tell you that the God's Folk clan is searching for the person behind you. If you call for help, then I'm afraid they won't be able to leave alive. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. I won't call for help. Don't force me. The old man stared at Yi Xian. Hasn't the human behind you already broken the rules? Call for help. Yi Xian turned to look at Jingji. How many times has he asked me to call for help? Jingji thought for a moment and then he said, It seems to be the 3rd time. You can call for help. It was them who asked you to call for help, not you. The white-haired old man and I can testify to that. Yi Xian nodded, all right. As he spoke he took out the green profound sword and said, they asked me to call for you. I originally refused but they kept forcing me. Why don't you attack again? For the last time. After a moment of silence, the green profound sword started to tremble. Chapter 1855. Seeing the green profound sword in his hand tremble, Yi Xian hurriedly said, Qing'er? A sword hum suddenly resounded. Then the green profound sword suddenly flew up. A ray of sword light directly pierced the old man's forehead. At the same time, the heads of the remaining Gate of God experts flew out. More than 30 bloody heads flew out at the same time. It was an extremely bloody scene. The old man who was pierced by the sword light was stunned. How did I die? He and the surrounding Gate of God experts were killed before they could even react. The old man's eyes were somewhat blank. Didn't the divine human race want to stop the people behind Yi Xian? Where are the divine human race? In the dark, Yanji's expression instantly became solemn. Who was it? She couldn't sense it at all. Even with her strength, she couldn't sense the person who attacked. At this moment, Yanji's pupils suddenly shrank because the green profound sword suddenly shot towards her. It's over. This thought arose in Yanji's mind. Because when she saw the sword flying towards her, the sword had already pierced through her forehead and locked onto her soul. She didn't even have the strength to fight back. Yanji was stunned. Who was it? Yi Xian glanced at Yanji, who was locked by the green profound sword. He was the one who asked Qing to be merciful. This woman was still useful to him. Yi Xian opened his palm and the green profound sword appeared in his hand. Yanji was still locked. There was sword light in his body. The sword light left behind by the plain-dressed woman. Yi Xian looked at the green profound sword in his hand and smiled. Qing. The green profound sword slightly trembled as if it was responding. Yi Xian smiled and said, I won't let you wait too long. The green profound sword trembled and then calmed down. Gone. At this moment Qing really left. Because he could no longer sense Qing-er's aura. The reason he summoned Qing was because he could sense a trace of Qing-er's aura through the green profound sword. In other words, Qing-er was paying attention to this place. But now that wisp of aura had disappeared. There were two possibilities. The first possibility was that Qing-er had left. The second possibility was that Qing-er had cut off all contact with him and wanted him to walk the rest of the way on his own. No matter what, he could only rely on himself in the future. After a moment of contemplation, Yi Xian took the green profound sword and entered the stone door. Beyond the stone door was another starry sky. Yi Xian saw that there were more than a dozen super arrays covering the starry sky. These great arrays were all locking down the existing universe below. How generous! Yi Xian's expression turned grave. The strength of the celestial race was much stronger than what he had expected. These formations were definitely not something an ordinary person could construct. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian drew his sword and slashed. A wisp of sword light tore through space. In an instant, the super arrays in the starry sky were destroyed bit by bit. Yi Xian looked into the distance. At the end of his vision, he vaguely saw an unknown world. God domain? Yi Xian frowned. After a moment of contemplation, he returned below. At this moment, the existing universe had gradually returned to normal. Yanji looked at Yi Xian. Was the green-robed man or the plain-dressed woman? At this moment she was extremely shocked. She knew that the celestial race had greatly underestimated the people behind Yi Xian. Yi Xian glanced at Yanji and smiled. Let's go back and talk slowly. After saying that, he directly sent Yanji into Xiaota's body. Yi Xian looked at the white-haired elder and Jingji. Maybe it's just the beginning? The white-haired elder and Jingji were silent. They were not in contact with the celestial race but just a few human puppets cultivated by the celestial race. Now that those human puppets have been killed by them, the next step is to face the celestial race head-on. Without a doubt, the celestial race is stronger. Jingji suddenly looked at Yi Xian. In any case, I will follow you. The white-haired elder hurriedly said, I will follow young Master Yi. Yi Xian. Their intentions were very simple, follow Yi Xian. In any case, Yi Xian will not die. As long as Yi Xian does not die, they will not die. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian said, Miss Jingji, you have to help me deal with the matters outside this universe. Jingji nodded, I will take care of the matters outside. Some looked at the white-haired elder. Senior, are there any other people around you who are as strong as you? The white-haired elder hesitated and said, there are one or two, but they are very afraid of death. If they are afraid of death, they will not stand up. Yi Xian smiled, what if there are benefits? The white-haired elder's eyes lit up. What benefits? Yi Xian said, for example, going to my tower to cultivate. The white-haired elder said in a low voice, young Master Yi, are you serious? He had heard of Yi Xian Xiaota's abnormal ability. If he could really cultivate in there, the benefits would be too great for him. Yi Xian nodded, yes. Senior can go in and cultivate at any time. If Senior's friends are willing to help, they can also go in and cultivate. Not only that, but I can also help Senior and the others reach a higher level. He found that the seal within the white-haired elder's body had not disappeared. The seal left behind by the celestial race. In fact, he was also slightly shocked by the white-haired elder because this old man had actually cultivated to such a level before the seal was broken. This was very terrifying. Although this old man had not surpassed the divine soul realm, his strength was definitely not weaker than Shaoan and Jingji. The white-haired elder said in a low voice, like Miss Jingji and Missin? Yi Xian nodded. The white-haired elder sighed softly. Yi Xian was a little puzzled. Senior, why are you sighing? The white-haired elder said softly, many years ago I felt that there might be a seal in my body because no matter how I cultivated, I could not take that last step. At that time I was not too sure. I never thought that there would be such a seal in our human body. Saying that, he looked at Yi Xian. When I saw your sister that day I wanted to ask, but she... Saying that, he shook his head and smiled bitterly. He wanted to ask, but he did not dare. He was afraid that this question would be the last one in his life. Yi Xian smiled. Senior, let me help you break the seal first. The white-haired elder bowed respectfully. Thank you. Yi Xian said, you are welcome. Saying that, he opened his palm and the profound azure sword in his hand directly sank into the white-haired elder's chest. Boom. The white-haired elder's body trembled violently. The next moment, his whole body seemed to be relieved of a heavy burden. Just broken. The white-haired elder took a deep breath. He once again bowed respectfully to Yi Xian. Little friend, I Lin Shan will never forget your kindness. Yi Xian said, Senior Lin Shan, go and contact your friends. If they are willing, that is naturally good. If not, we will not force them. Lin Shan nodded, understood. Saying that, he turned around and left. Yi Xian looked at Jingji. I will leave the outside to you. I want to interrogate this divine human clan woman. Jingji glanced at Yi Xian. Don't use force. Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. What do you mean? Am I Yi Xian that kind of person? Jingji turned around and ran away. Yi Xian was furious. This woman is really... Am I that kind of lecherous person? Without thinking much, Yi Xian returned to Xiaota. Yi Xian walked in front of Yanji. At this moment, Yanji was curiously looking around. Gradually, shock appeared in her eyes. Obviously, she discovered that Xiaota was not simple. Yi Xian was about to speak when Yanji suddenly said with a trembling voice, so the Tao of time and space can reach this level. Saying that, she looked at Yi Xian. Was this Xiaota created by the people behind you? Yi Xian looked at Yanji. I want to know everything about the divine human clan. Yanji stared at Yi Xian. What if I don't say? Yi Xian smiled. Then you can disappear from this world. Yanji immediately said, I will say. Yi Xian nodded. Good. Let's begin. I want to know everything about the divine human clan. You can deceive me, but you better deceive me well because I also like to deceive others. Yanji glanced at Yi Xian then said, Divine human clan, origin divine realm. Yi Xian listened quietly. As he listened, his expression became solemn. This was a race whose martial arts civilization far surpassed that of humans. The two races were not on the same level at all. The divine human clan's division of realms was also very interesting. It was divided into 9 levels, which was even simpler. Yanji's strength was at the peak of level 6, and level 6 was considered above average in the divine human clan. Yi Xian looked at Yanji. You said that the divine human clan wants to exterminate humans because there are people among humans who have surpassed the rules, making you feel uneasy? Yanji nodded. Yi Xian asked again, is it the plain-dressed woman and the green-robed man? Yanji nodded again. Hearing this, Yi Xian suddenly slapped his thigh. This was an undeserved disaster. Yanji glanced at Yi Xian. Those two are the people behind you. Yi Xian said softly, what do you think the divine human clan will do now? Yanji looked at Yi Xian. You killed those humans at Gate of God. This will make the divine human clan more vigilant, and it will also make the divine human clan more determined to exterminate humans. Yanji looked at Yi Xian. You killed those humans at the Gate of God. This will make the God clan more vigilant, and it will also make the God clan more determined to exterminate the human race. Yanji looked at Yi Xian. Then what do you think I should do now? Yi Xian said with a smile. What do you think I should do now? Yi Xian frowned slightly. Surrender? Yanji nodded. Human, you are a smart person, so I told you these things about the divine human clan. Because you will know that for now humans will absolutely not be able to stop the divine human clan. Because you will know that for now, the humans absolutely cannot stop the divine race. Just like me, I am restrained now, so I surrender. Living is the most important thing, isn't it? Being alive is the most important thing, isn't it? Yi Xian was speechless. He was speechless. What this woman said seemed to make sense. Yanji said, Young Master Yi, your best choice now is to surrender. Only by surrendering will you have a way to live. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Beg the divine human clan? I can't do it. Yanji sighed. Young Master Yi, I know you are still pinning your hopes on the two mysterious experts behind you. I admit that I've underestimated their strength before this. They are very strong, at least rank 7 or rank 8 experts. Let's just treat them as rank 8 experts for the time being. But do you think the two of them can fight against the Divine Human Clan? Do you know that before I came, our Divine Human Clan had already put them on the wanted list? But they are now in hiding and don't dare to show their real bodies. If they can really fight against our Divine Human Clan, why do they need to hide? What? Yi Xian was stunned. Did you misunderstand something? Yan Ji frowned. Misunderstanding? There is no misunderstanding. You may not know, but we are using our entire clan to find the man in green and the woman in plain dress. Yi Xian was speechless. P.S. Whenever I don't have any inspiration, I will look at the comments section. Chapter 1856. At this moment he suddenly felt slightly relaxed. The God Clan? Searching for Dad and Qing'er with the entire clan? Have they gone mad? What exactly happened to make them so confident? He was slightly curious. Do Qing'er and Dad know that the God Clan is searching for them with the entire clan? Meanwhile Yanji said, Young Master Yi, it's not too late for you to surrender now. Yi Xian glanced at Yanji and said, I'm afraid my father will break my legs. Yanji frowned slightly. Your father? Yi Xian nodded. The azure-clothed man you spoke of. Yanji smiled and said, Young Master Yi, if you surrender to my God Clan, then you'll be able to surpass your father in a few years at most under the nurturing of my God Clan. At that time, it's uncertain who will be fighting who. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, To be honest, I'm slightly tempted by your suggestion. But, isn't it a bit exaggerated to say that it'll only be a few years at most? Yanji smiled and said, You might not know much about our divine Tao civilization. If you do, then you'll know that it really isn't difficult to surpass your father. Yi Xian nodded. I really don't know much about the divine Tao civilization. However, I know my father very well. Defeat his father? He wanted to as well. But in 2 or 3 years, not to mention cultivating outside, he might not even be able to cultivate in the pagoda. Because even now, he still didn't know what level his father had reached. Yanji was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, Miss Yanji, let's end our chat here. Don't worry, I won't kill you for now. However, I can't let you go either. Stay in my Xiaota for a while. With that, he turned around and left Xiaota. After Yi Xian left, Yanji frowned. A moment later, she opened her palm and wanted to mobilize her strength. However, her expression changed drastically as soon as she did, and she hurriedly gave up. That strand of sword light was still within her body. Yanji slowly closed her eyes. The plainly dressed woman who sealed her was at least a rank 8 expert. Only an 8th level expert could lock her down with a wisp of sword light. 8th phase expert. Yanji's expression became a little complicated. She hadn't expected that a human could reach the 8th phase. The threat was too great. One had to know that although the overall strength of the human race was inferior to the divine race, the number of humans far exceeded the divine race. The reproduction rate of the human race was much more terrifying than that of the god race. Moreover, the learning ability of humans was very strong. If more and more people broke through the seal left by the god race, Yanji slowly closed his eyes. She didn't dare to continue thinking about it. He had to get out. After leaving Xiaota, Yi Xian arrived at the Jiang country of Qingzhou. At this moment, Jiang country had returned to normal. This side was still fine because there was Mo Yunqi and the others suppressing it, so this place was relatively stable. However, people were also anxious. The end of the universe. Even in the Qing province, there were all kinds of rumors everywhere, causing people to be on tenterhooks. As for other places, although there were Sword Alliance experts suppressing it everywhere, the manpower of Sword Alliance experts was limited, and they couldn't control the entire universe. The current universe was still a little chaotic. On a certain street, Yi Xian was walking slowly with a woman. The woman wore white armor and had a short saber hanging from her waist. The woman was Jiang Jiao. Jiang Jiao turned to look at Yi Xian. Is the matter about the god race true? Yi Xian nodded. Jiang Jiao said in a deep voice, I never thought that we humans were actually created by another race. It sounds really hard to accept. Yi Xian said with a smile, Me too. Jiang Jiao was a little puzzled. Then why did they want to exterminate humans? Yi Xian said, Because they discovered that some humans have already escaped their control. Jiang Jiao sighed, Do we humans have hope? Yi Xian looked at Jiang Jiao and said softly, Don't worry, I won't let anything happen to you. Jiang Jiao looked at Yi Xian, What about the other humans? Yi Xian went silent. Jiang Jiu hesitated for a moment and then she said, I know it's a little selfish of me to ask this. But I can't give up on the people of the state of Jiang, and I can't give up on the students of the academy. We can't let go of too many things. She paused for a moment and then she said, I'm sorry. I'll have to carry everything on my shoulders. Yi Xian smiled, what you can't let go of is what I can't let go of as well. A wisp of a complicated expression flashed in Jiang Jiu's eyes, you're carrying too much. Yi Xian smiled and then he said, Little Jiu, accompany me to a place. Jiang Jiu nodded, all right. Both of them vanished on the spot, and when they appeared again, they were already at the back mountain of Canglan Academy. Yi Xian brought Jiang Jiu to the depths of the back mountain, and there was a tomb here. Elder Ji's tomb. Yi Xian stood in front of Elder Ji's tomb and he remained silent. Jiang Jiu just silently accompanied him by his side. After a long time Yi Xian slowly knelt down. Elder Ji. Worthy for him Yi Xian to kneel. If it wasn't for Elder Ji risking his life to save him back then, he Yi Xian would already be dead. Jiang Jiu also knelt down. Yi Xian said softly, Little Jiu, do you know? Sometimes I kind of hate my selfish way of thinking. Jiang Jiu asked, why? Yi Xian said, if Elder Ji was also selfish back then me Mo Yunqi and Ji and I would all be dead. And he gave up his life for us. Jiang Jiu was silent. Yi Xian pulled Jiang Jiu up slowly, and he looked at Elder Ji's tomb in front of him and said with a smile, I used to be selfish because I only had my younger sister as a relative, but now I have many relatives and friends. Elder Mu, don't worry, I will protect Canglan Academy. As long as I Yi Xian am here, Canglan Academy will always be here. As he spoke, he looked at Jiang Jiu again, as long as I am here, the state of Jiang is here. Jiang Jiu held onto Yi Xian's hand and said softly, I'm afraid you're carrying too much on your back. Yi Xian smiled and said, it's what I should be carrying. Jiang Jiu looked at Yi Xian, and after a long time she cracked a smile and said, do you still remember the first time we met? Yi Xian nodded, of course. Jiang Jiu smiled and said, at that time, you said that no matter how bad the state of Jiang is, it's still our country and we can't allow outsiders to trample on it. These words of yours attracted me. Yi Xian laughed heartily. This scene seemed to have brought him back to the past. Jiang Jiu smiled lightly and said, when facing the divine clan I can't help you. Not only can I help you but I might even become your burden. But if you die don't worry, I Jiang Jiu won't live alone. Yi Xian turned to look at Jiang Jiu, and Jiang Jiu smiled and said, I can't face the divine clan with you, but I can die with you. Yi Xian spoke softly, we'll both live well. As he spoke he took Jiang Jiu's hand tightly. Just like that they walked towards the distance while holding hands. The God Domain. Some experts of the divine clan were gathered within the God Pagoda. The patriarch of the divine clan Mo Yen, who sat at the seat of the host, glanced at them and said, the divine entrance has been destroyed. As he spoke, his gaze descended onto Yen, aren't you going to explain? All the gods gazed at Yen. Yen's expression was quite unsightly. She hadn't expected that the humans would actually be able to destroy the divine entrance. After all, while there were very few experts in the divine entrance, there were over a dozen extraordinary formations there, and all of them covered the entire human world. It really couldn't be any easier to annihilate the humans while they were there. However, she hadn't imagined that it wasn't just the divine entrance that had been destroyed, even those formations had been destroyed. Meanwhile, the Grand Elder of the divine clan Yanzhu spoke abruptly, looks like this human is about to escape our control. Hearing this, the faces of the gods in the hall darkened. Mo Yen spoke abruptly, these humans must be destroyed as soon as possible. If they're allowed to rise, then wouldn't our divine clan become the laughingstock of the world? As he spoke, he gazed at Yen. Yen, I'll send someone else if you don't have the strength to do so. Yen spoke solemnly, there's no need. I'll head there myself this time. Mo Yen nodded, you can deploy some divine generals. Will 6 be enough? Yen spoke indifferently, 3 will be enough. Mo Yen nodded, deploy 3 divine generals. I don't want any mishaps to occur this time. Yen nodded slightly and was about to leave. Meanwhile, the Grand Elder Yanzhu spoke abruptly, we don't seem to have figured out why the divine entrance was destroyed. Yen frowned when she heard this. Why had the divine entrance been destroyed? She hadn't even tried to figure it out. Meanwhile, Yanzhu spoke solemnly, Yen, investigate this matter once you head down there. Because it's quite strange, so take 6 divine generals with you just in case. Yen thought for a moment and nodded, all right. Yen Zhu continued, remember not to be careless. Although these humans were created by the divine race, they already have their own martial arts civilization. Moreover, there are some humans that have jumped out of the rules that we have set. This means that there might be some special powerhouses among them. In short, don't underestimate them or be careless. Return immediately if you're no match for them. Yen nodded, understood. She turned around and left once she finished speaking. Mo Yen suddenly asked after Yen left, is there any news from Yuqin? An elder shook his head, no. Mo Yen frowned. He still hasn't found the woman in a plain dress and the green-clothed man? That elder spoke solemnly, no. Elder Yuqin inferred that they might have fled the god domain. Now, he's leading his men to the infinite world outside the god domain to search for them. The infinite world. Mo Yen frowned when he heard this. The infinite world wasn't under the god clan's jurisdiction. Mo Yen spoke solemnly, have they fled to that place? The elder spoke solemnly, it's very likely. Because we would have found them a long time ago if they were still in the god domain. However, we've searched the entire god domain and haven't found any traces of them. So, there's only one explanation, and it's that they've headed to the infinite world. Mo Yen pondered deeply for a moment before he said, continue searching. Send more men. Besides that, send a bounty to the infinite world. Anyone who provides information about them will be rewarded with 2 spirit crystal mines. The elder nodded slightly, understood. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. It didn't take long for a bounty to arrive at the infinite world. Chapter 1857. Yen arrived at the divine gate. At this moment, there was no one at the gate of God. As for the great arrays inside the gate of God, they had all been destroyed. Yen looked around. The next moment she disappeared. When she reappeared, she was already in the human world. When she sensed the auras of countless humans, she frowned. She did not like humans very much. After a while, Yen suddenly said, ask the people from the theological seminary to rebuild the formation. I'll go investigate. Behind Yen, a divine general left quietly. Yen disappeared from where she was. When she reappeared, she was already in an ancient city. At the moment, the ancient city was in chaos. Cries of distress could be heard everywhere. Yen glanced at the entire city, a mocking smile on his lips. You're indeed a lowly race. Even at a time like this. They were actually killing each other. Seriously. Suddenly, a sword howl resounded from within the city. A moment later, a voice resounded from within the city, and then another voice resounded from every corner of the city. My Sword Alliance is taking control of this city. From this moment onward, all who dare to cause trouble will be killed without mercy. Sword Alliance. Yen frowned. In next to no time, shrill cries resounded in the city, but it didn't take long for the city to slowly regain its calm. Seeing this, Yen's face darkened. Someone was maintaining order. Sword Alliance? Without a second thought, she disappeared on the spot. All Heaven's City. Yen went straight to the Sword Alliance's sword hall. There was only one person in the hall. It was the sword maniac. The sword addict looked at Yen calmly. Yen sized him up and said, where's the sword master of your Sword Alliance? Sword maniac asked, you are? Yen pressed down with his right hand. Sword addict's pupils shrank as she drew her sword and slashed. Boom. The sword light shattered, and the sword maniac was suppressed by a mysterious force. A mocking smile appeared on Yen's face. So weak. As she spoke, she was about to attack again. Meanwhile, a man had appeared in front of the sword crazy. When Yen entered the Sword Alliance, she had already informed Yi Xian. Yi Xian sized up Yen. God. Yen sneered, looks like you're not that stupid. Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword. A wisp of sword light flashed past. Yen narrowed his eyes and flicked his sleeves. Boom. The sword light shattered, and Yi Xian returned to his original position. But the next moment, a sword appeared in front of Yen without warning. Yen blocked with his arm. Boom. Yen retreated out of the sword temple. Outside the hall, Yen looked at her right arm. At that moment, there was a deep sword wound on her right arm. His defense had been broken. Seeing this, Yen's face instantly turned ferocious. She looked at Yi Xian in the distance and said, you lowly human, how dare you hurt me? Yi Xian looked at Yen. You're being racist. Just as Yen was about to speak, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already in front of Yen. Core Sword Domain. As soon as the Sword Domain appeared, Yen's expression changed. Chi 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 wrong. In an instant, countless sword lights engulfed her. After a moment of silence, the sword light suddenly shattered, and Yi Yan appeared in front of Yi Xian. At this moment Yi Yan no longer looked like a human. She had returned to her original form. However, her body was covered in sword marks and blood flowed from her body. In less than a breath's time she was covered in blood. Seeing this, Yi Xian's expression darkened. His opponent was much stronger than he had expected. The core sword domain had not been able to kill him. Yi Yan looked up at Yi Xian, or more accurately at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. At this moment, her eyes were solemn. Your sword? Yi Xian swung his sword again. Chi-chi. A ray of sword light slashed at Yi Yan like a bolt of lightning. Yi Yan punched out. Boom. The sword light shattered, and Yi Yan retreated hundreds of feet. Yi Xian slowly walked toward Yi Yan. With every step, a ray of sword light slashed at Yi Yan. A flying sword. In the distance, Yi Yan opened her right hand. Divine Wall. In an instant, a mysterious power suddenly surged from heaven and earth. In the blink of an eye, a golden divine wall appeared in front of her. Boom! The divine wall had actually blocked all of Yi Xian's sword light. At this moment Yi Yan suddenly said, "Reverse." As soon as she spoke, the divine wall suddenly trembled violently. In the next moment, numerous flying swords suddenly flew out of the divine wall and slashed at Yi Xian in the distance. They were even faster than Yi Xian. Reflect. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he took a step forward. He did not resist and let the flying swords slash at him. Absorb them all. All the flying swords were absorbed by him in an instant. Seeing this, Yi Yan frowned. What the hell is that? In the distance, Yi Xian greedily took a deep breath. At this moment, a thought suddenly appeared in his mind. If he could absorb sword chi, why didn't he make his own sword chi for himself to absorb? In theory it was possible. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He had gone mad. In the distance, Yi Yan said in a low voice, "Human, the sword in your hand." Yi Xian suddenly flew into a rage. Sword, 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 all you know is to talk about swords. Don't you see me? Am I not as good as this sword? Yi Yan stared at Yi Xian. You really are not as good as this sword. Damn it. Yi Xian was furious. He directly rushed out with his sword. Swoosh. A ray of sword light pierced through the air and slashed at Yi Yan. Yi Yan's lips curled into a mocking smile. Even if the sword is not simple, the person who wields it. At this point her expression suddenly changed. Because the speed of Yi Xian's sword suddenly increased. Yi Yan took a step back and the divine wall appeared again. Boom. A ray of sword light slashed at the divine wall. The divine wall shook violently, and Yi Yan repeatedly retreated. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly rushed forward and appeared in front of Yi Yan again. Sword domain. He once again displayed the core sword domain. A sword's cry suddenly resounded between heaven and earth. A ray of sword light instantly drowned Yi Yan, but the next moment the ray of sword light shattered, and Yi Yan had already retreated hundreds of feet. As soon as she stopped, Yi Xian appeared in front of her again. Yi Xian drew his sword and slashed. Life and death were decided by unsheathing the sword. The sword fell. Boom. The space in front of Yi Xian exploded, and Yi Yan retreated again. But as she retreated, she directly became illusory. She left this spacetime. At this moment, Yi Xian also disappeared from this spacetime. Seeing this, Yi Yan frowned. You haven't surpassed the divine soul realm. How can you leave this spacetime? At this point, she seemed to think of something and suddenly looked at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. It's your sword. Yi Xian glanced at Yi Yan, but he did not attack again. Up until now, he had a general understanding of this woman's strength. It was still quite difficult for him to kill her with his current strength. Moreover, it wasn't so easy for her to kill him. Yi Yan gazed at Yi Xian. I never expected that humans could actually develop to such an extent. Yi Xian glanced at Yi Yan and smiled. Miss, since you look down on humans so much, then let's make a bet. We'll fight one-on-one in a month and we won't stop until one of us dies. 1 month. Yi Yan's eyes narrowed slightly. You? Yi Xian nodded. Me? Yi Yan thought for a moment and said, all right. It would take at least a month to build the formation. Of course, she didn't have the ability to destroy the entire human race on her own. She had to rely on the formation. Yi Xian nodded. Then we'll meet in a month. I'll come look for you. He needed time. Moreover, if this woman caused trouble while he was cultivating, then it would be quite a headache for him. 1 month's time in the small pagoda was equivalent to 300 years. 300 years. If he cultivated for 300 years, wouldn't that be a waste? Yi Xian laughed. Miss, I'll see you in a month. With that he turned around and left. Ian looked at Yi Xian in the distance and sneered. I want to see how you'll kill me and save these humans in a month. With that, she turned around and disappeared into the horizon. After Yi Xian returned to the sword hall, Sword Maniac said in a low voice, That woman is very strong. Yi Xian nodded. Very strong. She probably didn't use her full strength just now. Sword Maniac looked at Yi Xian. Do you have any countermeasures? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, Can our Sword Alliance summon an ancestor? Sword Maniac was speechless. Yi Xian said seriously, I'm serious. If other forces can summon an ancestor, then our Sword Alliance should be able to as well, right? Sword Maniac said, We can't, but you're the Sword Master's son. You should be able to call him father, right? Yi Xian shook his head. I can't. Sword Maniac frowned. Yi Xian looked around carefully and said, I even suspected that I wasn't his biological son. With that he returned to Xiaota. In the sword hall, Sword Maniac hesitated for a moment and said, Has the Sword Master been cuckolded? The man in green was speechless. After Yi Xian returned to Xiaota, he went to find Yan Ji. When he saw Yi Xian, Yan Ji hurriedly said, Young Master Yi, have you thought about surrendering? Yi Xian glanced at Yan Ji and smiled. I have that thought, but I don't think your divine Tao civilization is that great. Yan Ji frowned slightly. How could that be? If you come into contact with our divine Tao civilization, then you... Yi Xian suddenly said, You said before that you're a teacher of some seminary? Yan Ji nodded. Yes. Yi Xian said seriously, Then help me improve. Let me see just how great your divine Tao civilization is. Yan Ji glanced at Yi Xian. You're trying to fool me? Yi Xian smiled. I just want to see your divine Tao civilization. Look, I'm already so powerful without coming into contact with your divine Tao civilization. If your divine Tao civilization isn't so powerful, then wouldn't I be at a disadvantage? Yan Ji fell silent. Yi Xian looked at Yan Ji. Come, let me see your divine Tao civilization. Yan Ji said solemnly, If you don't surrender after your divine Tao civilization helps you improve, then what? Yi Xian raised his right hand. I swear. I swear. If I don't surrender after the divine Tao civilization helps me improve, then I'll. Yan Ji suddenly said, Swear in the name of your family. Yi Xian thought for a moment. Then he said, My father will be hacked to death. Yan Ji hesitated for a moment. Then he said, Your oath is a little too vicious. I believe you. Yi Xian. Chapter 1858. The Divine Tao Civilization. Actually, Yi Xian was very curious about the Divine Tao Civilization. In fact, Qing'er's martial Tao far surpassed the Divine Tao Civilization, but it was not suitable for him to learn now. Qing'er's martial Tao philosophy was too advanced. Even if Qing'er was willing to explain it to him, he might not be able to understand it. The gap between him and Qing'er was still too great. Yan Ji began to explain the Divine Tao Civilization to Yi Xian. The Divine Tao Civilization originated from the Divine Realm and had a history of 80 billion years. 80 billion years. When he heard this number, Yi Xian was shocked. This was too terrifying. And human history was less than 10 billion years. The reason why the celestial race created humans was for the power of faith. As long as humans cultivated, the divine humans would have the power of faith. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian suddenly asked, Miss Yan Ji, is the Divine Tao Civilization the earliest civilization in this universe? Yan Ji shook her head. No. Yi Xian frowned slightly. There was an earlier one? Yan Ji nodded. Yes. Also, you're wrong about one thing. That is the universe. Usually we call it the endless universe. Because as of now, the universe still has no boundaries. There are only differences in size. Yi Xian said solemnly, There are no boundaries? Yan Ji nodded. There are no boundaries. Boundless. This universe that you humans live in, which is what you call the current universe, if placed in the entire universe, it is not even a speck of dust. Yi Xian's brows furrowed deeply. Not even a speck of dust? Yan Ji nodded slightly. There are hundreds of trillions of galaxies that we can detect now, and among them, the smallest galaxy contains billions of worlds. And this world that you humans live in is one of these billions of worlds. To be precise, your place is not qualified to be called a universe. Yi Xian was silent, somewhat shocked. Yan Ji continued. In this vast universe, many life forms are born, and these life forms will evolve on their own. After reaching a certain level, they will form a civilization. Of course, there would be differences in strength. From the lowest to the highest, They were a level 1 civilization, a level 2 civilization, a level 3 civilization, a level 4 civilization, a level 5 civilization, a level 6 civilization, and a level 7 civilization. Now, level 7 civilizations were the highest known civilizations. However, according to the speculations of the scholars of the god race, the highest civilization should be level 10. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Level 10? Yanji nodded, "Level 10. Although it is only a guess, we firmly believe that such a civilization definitely exists. Our god race is also constantly exploring new galaxies, new universes, and new civilizations." Yi Xian suddenly asked, "What level of civilization does the god race belong to?" Yan knew. Third level civilization. Yi Xian was shocked. Level 3? You only belong to a level 3 civilization? Yanji frowned. Is level 3 very low? Yi Xian said, "Aren't there 7 levels in total? You're only level 3, isn't that low?" Yanji said angrily, "You humans can't even be considered level 1. Yi Xian was speechless. Yanji said again, "Do you know how terrifying a level 3 civilization is? A level 3 civilization already understands the essence of life and can create life. Not only that, but they can also understand the essence of time and space. As for you humans are still exploring time and space. As for the essence of life, you humans don't even have this concept." Yi Xian was silent. Currently, the powerhouses in this universe were indeed still studying time and space. As for the essence of life? It seemed like no one was studying this. Yanji said again, "Do you know why you humans are trapped here? Because you haven't even fully understood the Tao of time and space. We just drew a circle and trapped you in this universe." Yi Xian nodded. "Compared to you humans, we are indeed very backward." Yanji glanced at Yi Xian. "You humans have no chance against the god race." Yi Xian suddenly said, "This chapter is not finished. Please continue. I met a woman before. I fought with her. She doesn't seem to be that powerful." Then he described the woman's appearance. Yanji frowned slightly. "Elder Yen?" Yi Xian asked, "Is that woman an elder of your god race?" Yanji nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian said, "She doesn't seem to be suppressing me." Yanji pointed at the green profound sword in Yi Xian's hand. "The next time you meet her, try not to use this sword." Yi Xian looked at his green profound sword. "Is it because of this sword?" Yanji said calmly, "This sword can allow you to ignore the suppression of time and space. Otherwise, just the suppression of time and space alone will be enough to beat you up." Yi Xian was silent. Suppression of time and space. He thought of the great life water. If he didn't have this green profound sword, he would have been beaten up. This woman named Yi Yan's strength and Tao of time and space must be above the great life water. Yanji said again, "Your strength is not much, but your sword and the sword skills you use are very unusual. This is why you can injure a god." Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then smiled. "Miss Yanji, come tell me about this divine Tao civilization. I want to improve myself and at the same time, see how amazing your divine Tao civilization is." Yanji thought for a moment, then said, "Your current realm is equivalent to a level 4, but if you use the sword in your hand, your strength is equivalent to a level 6. Yi Xian smiled. "Then let's start now." Yanji said solemnly, "Then let's start with time and space. We'll start with the basics." In the following time, Yi Xian began to listen to Yanji's explanation. It had to be said that Yanji was really good. She was a teacher, and her explanation was really detailed and easy to understand. And her explanation also opened a new door for Yi Xian. Time and space. Compared to the god race, humans were indeed much weaker. The god race had only set up a restriction in this space-time, and humans could not jump out of the circle. Space-time restriction. In fact, he was a little worried about Qing and his father. After talking in detail with Yanji, he more or less understood this endless universe. What level did Qing belong to in this endless universe? If she was measured in terms of civilization, what level of civilization did she belong to? He did not know. The Gate of God. At this moment, inside the Gate of God, Yi Yan was leading a group of God race scholars to rebuild a formation. Although Yi Xian had destroyed the formation here, he did not know that as long as this place was not destroyed, even if the formation was destroyed, it could still be rebuilt. In fact, the God race could directly send people to destroy the existing universe below, but this was a bit of a waste of time. If they used a formation, they could directly target the entire universe. At this moment, an old God race suddenly walked in front of Yi Yan and bowed slightly. "Elder Yi Yan, the formation will be completed in half a month at most." "Half a month?" Yen smiled. Good. Hurry up, I don't want to give the humans below too much time. The old man nodded. Understood. With that he retreated. Yen looked up into the starry sky and said softly, I wonder if they found the woman in the plain dress and the man in green. The Infinite Realm. The Infinite Realm no longer belonged to the God Realm. It was a world outside of the God Realm. This world was infinitely large and there were many messy forces in it. Even the God race was wary of these forces. The universe was so big the God race was not invincible. In the Infinite Realm there was a small city. Desolation City. The city was not big but it had a long history. It had existed for millions of years. This chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. And this city had a special place. It was the only safe place in the Infinite Realm. The entire Infinite Realm was chaotic. Even the God race would not let their clansmen enter this world easily. But in Desolation City it was very safe. Because no one dared to make a move here. And the reason why no one dared to make a move here was because the city lord was said to be a powerhouse who had surpassed the 9th rank. In a shabby tea house, Yu Qin of the God race sat quietly. He had been here for more than 10 days. But he still could not find the woman in the plain dress. But it was not like there was no news at all. At this time a tree man walked in. The tree man walked in front of Yu Qin and looked at him. Something. Yu Qin opened his palm and a storage ring appeared in his hand. The tree man opened his palm, but Yu Qin had no intention of giving it to him. The tree man looked at Yu Qin. Are you messing with me? Yu Qin smiled. I am afraid that you are messing with me. After a moment of silence, the tree man said, more than 10 days ago, I saw that woman heading east. Yu Qin frowned. East? The tree man nodded. After a moment of silence, Yu Qin put down the storage ring, stood up and left. The tree man put away the storage ring, turned around and left. After Yu Qin left the tea house, he led everyone to the east. Roughly 4 hours later, Yu Qin had already brought the 3 divine generals to a black hole. As soon as they entered the black hole, they felt an extremely terrifying force enveloping them, as if it was about to tear them apart. Yu Qin furrowed his brows. He pressed his right hand forward and the terrifying force around him disappeared without a trace. Just then, a black figure appeared not far away from Yu Qin and the others. Yu Qin's face changed at the sight of the figure. You're Emperor Jun. A 9th rank Emperor Jun. What was he doing here? Emperor Jun looked at Yu Qin in silence. Yu Qin glanced at Emperor Jun and noticed that he was missing a hand. Was he injured? Emperor Jun asked, Are you from the divine humans? Yu Qin quickly nodded, yes. He knew that Emperor Jun was friends with the divine humans so he relaxed a lot. Emperor Jun nodded. I am friends with your Grand Supreme Elder. How is he? Yu Qin smiled. Grand Supreme Elder is in seclusion. Emperor Jun pondered for a moment, then asked, Why are you here? Yu Qin bowed at once and said, Your Excellency, we are here to find a woman in a plain dress. A woman in a plain dress. Emperor Jun's eyelid twitched and his body trembled. Yu Qin added, Your Excellency, this woman has an irreconcilable feud with the divine humans. If Your Excellency sees her, please inform us and we will be eternally grateful. An irreconcilable feud. Emperor Jun was stunned, then quickly turned around and said in horror, Senior, I have nothing to do with the divine humans. I have an irreconcilable feud with them as well. Hearing this, Yu Qin was stunned. Not far away there was a woman in a plain dress. Yu Qin narrowed his eyes at the sight of her. He clenched his right hand and a powerful force began to gather within him. The woman stared at Yu Qin. Before the plain-dressed woman could finish her words, Yu Qin suddenly disappeared from the spot. He had attacked. He did not like to waste his breath before making a move. All he knew was that Daoyi had a principle. Those who attack first gain the upper hand, those who attack later suffer the consequences. Those who like to waste their breath usually met a tragic end. Attack first and gain the upper hand. End of this chapter. Chapter 1859. Yu Qin's idea was good. It was the right thing to do. But reality was cruel. A sword pierced through Yu Qin's forehead the moment he made his move. The surroundings instantly fell silent. Yu Qin was dumbfounded. I've been stabbed? The woman looked at Yu Qin. Are you looking for me? Yu Qin's eyes were filled with disbelief. At that moment he was truly terrified. Because he didn't even notice how the woman had attacked. At that moment his mind cleared up. This woman might be a rank 9 expert. She wasn't someone he could fight. But how could a human be a rank 9 expert? Suddenly, the emperor spoke with a trembling voice, Senior, I have nothing to do with the god tribe. Yuchen felt as if he had been struck by lightning. Senior? His Majesty was calling this woman senior? Could it be that she was an expert above the 9th level? How is that possible? The woman glanced at the Emperor, and the Emperor quickly bowed. He had been so arrogant with Yuchen earlier. But now he had lost an arm. If he didn't humble himself, he wouldn't just lose an arm, he would lose his head. The woman in a plain dress was just about to speak when the space in front of her suddenly split apart. In the next moment, a man walked out from within. A man in green. The man in green smiled at the woman. Let's go. The woman said nothing. The man in green said, we agreed to let him walk his own path. The woman still didn't speak. The man in green smiled bitterly. If you can't bear to part with him, you'll hurt him in the end. He's getting more and more flashy now. He's growing more and more reliant on you. That's not a good thing, don't you think? The woman said after a moment of silence, let's go. The green-clothed man nodded, and then the two of them were about to leave. Meanwhile, the Imperial Emperor hurriedly said, Seniors, is that person you were talking about your junior? The man in green was about to speak when the woman said, he's my brother. She took out a portrait and it was a portrait of Yi Xian. She looked at the Emperor, this is my brother. He's not very strong right now. Do you understand? The Emperor nodded, I understand, I understand. The green-robed man was speechless. This woman is helping that little bastard cheat again. The woman in a plain dress still wanted to say something when the green-clothed man spoke abruptly. Let's go. The plain-clothed woman glanced at the azure-clothed man. Why are you so annoying? The azure-robed man, the woman looked at the Emperor. He's a very kind man. Don't bully him. The Emperor quickly said, of course not. From now on, young Master Ye's business is my business. I will live and die with young Master Yi. The woman in a plain dress nodded slightly. The green-clothed man by her side suddenly said, there's no need for that. There's nothing bad about that little fellow suffering a little. The Emperor quickly said, I understand. I understand Senior's meaning. I will appear at the most crucial moment. This will allow young Master Yi to suffer a little, yet not be in any danger. The green-robed man was dumbfounded. Holy shit. Is that what I mean? He still wanted to say something, but the woman suddenly said, let's go. This place is boring. Let's find some people to kill. As soon as she finished speaking, she transformed into a streak of sword light and vanished into the distance. Find some people to kill? The green-robed man frowned but didn't think much of it. He also disappeared into the distance. After the two left, the Emperor heaved a sigh of relief. As if remembering something, he looked at Yuchen. This chapter is not finished. Please continue. Before he could speak, he waved his right hand. Boom. Yuchen and the other two were wiped out. The Emperor looked around and murmured, this is the first time I've realized how dangerous this world can be. Inside Xiaota's room. Under Yanji's guidance, Yi Xian's cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds. Now, according to the Divine Human Tribe's realm, he had already reached the 5th stage. A Phase 5 expert. Even among the Divine Human race, he was considered slightly above average. With the addition of the Azure Profound Sword and his sword skills, his true combat power was equivalent to that of a Phase 7. But that wasn't enough for Yi Xian. When Yi Xian reached Phase 5, Yanji didn't want to teach him anymore. Somewhere on a boulder, Yanji looked at Yi Xian. You will never surrender to the Divine Humans. Yi Xian smiled. Yes. Yanji was silent. Yi Xian said, Miss Yanji, let's not talk about these unhappy things. Let's continue. Yanji glanced at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Yanji, are you unwilling? Yanji asked, do I have any other choice? Yi Xian shook his head. No. Yanji sighed. She was so unlucky. She had been captured by a human. That was so embarrassing. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Yanji, you are a smart person. I don't want to treat you badly. So, do you understand what I mean? Yanji nodded. Resist? It wasn't that she hadn't thought about it. However, with that wisp of sword light in her body, she couldn't resist at all. The reason why she agreed to Yi Xian previously was because she wanted to stabilize Yi Xian, and then think of a way to remove that wisp of sword light in her body. However, during this period of time, she discovered that she couldn't remove that wisp of sword light at all. At this moment, she was already somewhat worried. Although her strength wasn't particularly strong in the Divine Humans, she understood these realms very well. Now she was somewhat suspicious. She suspected that the woman in the plain dress might not be as simple as a rank 9 expert. Could it be the legendary rank 10? She didn't dare to think too much. At this time Yi Xian said again, "Miss Yanji, let's begin." Yanji nodded. "All right." As she said, she continued to teach Yi Xian cultivation. She had no choice. Unless she wanted to die. She knew that as long as she didn't cooperate, this human in front of her would definitely kill her. She wasn't particularly afraid of death. What she was most afraid of was this human in front of her sullying her. During this period of time, she had more or less understood the personality of this human in front of her. This was a very lecherous human. If she didn't cooperate, this human might very well humiliate her. This was what she absolutely couldn't tolerate. People could die, but she absolutely couldn't be humiliated by this guy. Regarding Yanji being so cooperative, Yi Xian was actually also somewhat surprised. He didn't expect that this woman was actually so tactful and so cooperative with him. Of course, this was a good thing. Under Yanji's guidance, Yi Xian started to charge for rank 6. And Yi Xian also let Lanxiu, Shaoan and the rest in the tower learn together. Under Yanji's guidance, everyone's improvement was very obvious. Among them Shaoan Jingji and that white-haired old man God Emperor, all reached rank 5 too. Once they started cultivating, this time passed very quickly. In a blink of an eye, 10 days passed. Of course, in Xiao Ta's world, a full 100 years had already passed. It looked like a lot, but to Yi Xian and the rest, it seemed to be a matter of a blink of an eye. And during this cultivation process, Yi Xian was also not anxious for quick results. Instead, he took it step by step, striving to walk each step steadily. To him in the past, when he cultivated, "This chapter is not over, please flip the page," most of them walked the wrong path. Even if they improved themselves, there would generally be a situation where their realm was unstable. Moreover, they didn't digest it properly and started to charge for the next realm again. Now, he didn't want to make such a mistake again. Sniff a little. And Yanji, who was teaching them, was also somewhat shocked. She didn't expect that this batch of humans in front of her was actually so talented. Especially Yi Xian. Don't look at how Yi Xian was usually flashy, but once he started cultivating, it was not an ordinary kind of seriousness and hard work. Even when he encountered some particularly painful processes, his brows didn't even blink. This perseverance and mentality shocked her. At this moment, she had to admit that there were also many outstanding existences among humans. The current her only wanted to think of a way to leave Xiao Ta, return to the divine race, and let the divine race not look down on humans. But unfortunately, no matter what she said, Yi Xian wouldn't let her go. This human wasn't too easy to fool. Beside the huge rock, Yanji glanced at Yi Xian, who was sitting cross-legged in the distance, and sighed in her heart. She only hoped that the divine race would hurry up and make a move. The sooner they made a move, the better. Moreover, it was best to directly send a rank 9 expert down because this guy was already rank 6. And now this guy was charging for rank 7. If not for familiarizing himself with the Tao of spacetime, he would already be rank 7. Most importantly, that sword in Yi Xian's hand. That sword was simply a freak. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. He took a deep breath and his entire body trembled. Comfortable. Right at this moment, Yanji suddenly said in astonishment, "Rank 7? Yi Xian looked at Yanji and said with a smile, "Yes." Yanji's face darkened. "You're really a freak." Yi Xian asked in reply, "Do you divine race cultivate very slowly?" Yanji knew, there are fast ones, but there are very few who are as fast as you. Yi Xian said with a smile, "Actually, I can still be faster, but I don't want to be that fast. As a man, you can't be too fast." Yanji frowned slightly. "As a man, you can't be too fast? What do you mean? Isn't the faster the better?" Yi Xian blinked. "You don't understand?" Yanji shook his head. "I don't understand. Can you explain it in detail?" Yi Xian shook his head. "I can't." Yanji still wanted to say something, but Yi Xian suddenly said with a smile, "Miss Yanji, I'll get busy first." With that said, he left Xiaota. Yanji frowned. "What do you mean?" In a certain deathly silent star region, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. After a moment of silence, he suddenly drew his sword and slashed. With one slash, the entire deathly silent star region was directly erased. Forcefully erased. Yi Xian looked at the Qingshan sword in his hand. What he used just now was drawing sword to determine life and death, and he stacked up to 1590. 1590. The power of this slash was more than 100 times stronger than before. Especially when he used the Qingshan sword. Invincible. At this moment he had a feeling of invincibility. Yi Xian looked at the Qingshan sword in his hand. and his expression gradually became solemn. He was very strong now. However, he still couldn't see through the Qingxian sword. How strong was Qing Er? He asked before, but Qing Er didn't answer. He felt invincible. However, invincibility should have a limit, right? Was she always invincible? He really wanted to believe that Qing Er would always be invincible, but the universe was really big. Even the powerful celestial race was only a level 3 civilization. Would Qing Er be defeated one day? End of this chapter. Chapter 1860. Yi Xian shook his head. Instead of worrying about this, it was better to worry about himself. If he was not strong enough, he would only be a burden to Qing Er and his father in the future. At that moment, as if sensing something, he suddenly looked up and frowned. Are we going to make a move? With that, he disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already at the Divine Gate. In front of the Divine Gate, Yi Yan was already waiting. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Yi Yan, isn't there still half a month? Yi Yan looked at Yi Xian. I don't want to wait another half a month. Can I? Yi Xian nodded. Sure. With that, he suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Sword draw to decide life and death. Life and death decided by unsheathing sword with 1,500 stacks. With this strike, Yi Yan's calm expression changed dramatically. She twisted her right hand. Wall of God. Boom. In an instant, a golden barrier appeared in front of her. At that moment, Yi Xian's sword reached her. Kaboom. With a deafening explosion, the golden barrier shattered. At the same time, a ray of sword light sank into Yi Yan's forehead. Boom. Yi Yan's body shattered. Yi Yan was dumbfounded. Gone? She was gone just like that? With only her soul left, Yi Yan looked at Yi Xian blankly. How did you suddenly become so strong? Yi Xian smiled. I've been cultivating hard for the past 10 days. Yi Yan looked as if she had lost her soul. 10 days? You went from 4th phase to 7th phase in 10 days? Yi Xian frowned. Yes. What's wrong with you? Yi Yan was speechless. At that moment she was truly dumbfounded. When she first met Yi Xian's strength was only 4th phase in the divine human tribe. Now Yi Xian's strength was at least 7th phase. How many days had it been? This guy went from 4th phase to 7th phase? Yi Yan looked at Yi Xian and wanted to say something, but Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, Bye-bye. As his voice trailed off, the green profound sword in his hand suddenly sank into the space between Master Yi Yan's brows. Boom. Yi Yan's soul was immediately absorbed. After absorbing Misfortune's soul, the Qingxian sword trembled. Yi Xian smiled and said, Little soul, how much longer do you need to improve? Soul said solemnly, We need at least 100 souls of this level. 100. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. As he spoke, he put away the green profound sword and entered the stone door. When he entered the stone door, he saw a group of gods. These gods were all scholars from the College of Gods. They had been ordered to set up the array formation. When they saw Yi Xian, they were all stunned. Yi Xian glanced at the gods before his gaze landed on the formation not far away from them. He frowned when he saw the array formation. At this time, one of the gods suddenly said, Human, where is Elder Yi Yan? Yi Xian said, Gone. The god frowned slightly. Gone? Yi Xian nodded. Very peacefully. Hearing this, the god's expressions changed. Yi Xian looked at the gods and smiled. I will send you down to accompany her. As he spoke, the green profound sword in his hand suddenly flew out. Chi. In the blink of an eye, all the gods were killed. With his current flying sword, he could even kill a Phase 6 expert in an instant. Only an expert of the same level could barely block his flying sword. After absorbing the souls of the gods, the green profound sword was clearly excited. Young master, this is a great tonic. Yi Xian laughed and put away the green profound sword. With a smile, he put away the azure profound sword and walked to the front of the formation. He glanced at it and his face sank. This array formation covered the entire human universe. The god race refuses to give up on the destruction of the human race. Yi Xian didn't think too much about it and swung his sword. A ray of sword energy entered the array formation, and it instantly shattered and was obliterated. At the same time, the entire divine gate vanished into thin air. Yi Xian looked up into the starry sky. He knew that this wasn't the end. Destroying Yi Yan would only make the god race pay more attention to him. In other words, the god race would definitely send even stronger experts next time. Right at this moment, his pupils constricted abruptly, and the green profound sword in his hand started to tremble at this moment. Danger. Yi Xian suddenly turned around and saw a middle-aged man standing not too far away from him. The god race's patriarch, Mo Yen. Yi Xian gazed at Mo Yen with an extremely solemn expression. His intuition told him that this person was extremely dangerous. Mo Yen was also looking at Yi Xian at this moment. After a while he said, "Rank 7. At this moment, Yan Ji's voice suddenly rang in Yi Xian's mind. "Young Master Yi, he is the god race's patriarch. It's not too late to surrender." At this moment she was very excited. The god race finally stopped looking down on humans. The patriarch had come personally. That's great. What she was most worried about was that the god race would always look down on humans. They would first send a rank 6 expert, and after the rank 6 expert was killed, they would send a rank 7 expert. After the rank 7 expert was killed, they would send in rank 8 expert. If they really did that, it would be equivalent to giving these humans experience points. But now, after Yi Yan's death, the god race's patriarch had come personally. The god race's patriarch. Yi Xian was silent. Damn it. Why didn't they play by the rules? They came directly Big Brother. Not only that, but he also sensed some very obscure auras in the surroundings. Obviously they didn't come alone. At this moment Mo Yen suddenly said, "I never thought that you humans could develop to this extent. This is something we didn't expect." Yi Xian suddenly said, "Aren't you looking for a man in a green shirt and a woman in a plain dress?" Mo Yan's eyes narrowed. "You know where they are." Yi Xian said, "If you can't find them I can help." Mo Yen smiled, "That's great." Yi Xian thought about it, then said, "How about this, I will go with you to the god race to help you find them. As for the humans below, don't touch them for now." Mo Yen smiled, "Why should I?" Yi Xian smiled, "The two of them have jumped out of the circle you drew and they have now entered your universe. If they are allowed to come into contact with a higher level of martial arts civilization with their talent." At this point he didn't continue. Mo Yen was silent. Compared to the entire human race, he was more worried about the two who had jumped out of the god race's rules. That was a great danger. Mo Yen looked at Yi Xian, "Perhaps you know where they are, but I don't believe you. It's better to cripple people like you before anything else." As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his right hand, and a powerful force suddenly gathered in his hand. Yi Xian's expression instantly changed when he saw this. He wasn't used to this enemy suddenly not giving him a chance. Right at this moment, Mo Yen was about to attack, but Yi Xian hurriedly said, "We can still talk." Mo Yen shook his head, "Let's talk after I cripple you." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished on the spot. Yi Xian's pupils constricted, and he suddenly held the sword in his right hand horizontally. Invincible sword domain. Bang. Besides the space where Yi Xian was, the space around him was directly obliterated. His face also turned pale in an instant. Moreover, his sword domain was gradually being obliterated. It couldn't resist Mo Yan's strength at all. The gap in their strengths was too huge. Mo Yen glanced at Yi Xian from afar. "Your domain isn't bad. Unfortunately, you haven't comprehended its quintessence." As soon as he finished speaking, he pressed the fingers of his right hand together and moved lightly. In an instant Yi Xian's sword domain actually started to disintegrate bit by bit. Moreover, his entire body had started to disintegrate as well. Yi Xian was horrified and he immediately activated the core sword domain. Bang! In an instant, an expanse of sword light enveloped him. Mo Yen frowned when he witnessed this scene, and then he moved lightly with the fingers of his right hand. Split. This. In an instant Yi Xian's sword light actually started to disperse bit by bit towards the surroundings. The core sword domain was directly destroyed. Yi Xian suddenly charged forward, and he arrived directly in front of Mo Yen before he slashed with his sword. Life and death decided by drawing the sword. 1,500 sword strikes decided by drawing the sword. As soon as the strike descended, Mo Yan's figure instantly became ethereal. He'd entered another expanse of space. At this instant Yi Xian immediately fled out of this expanse of space. The sword descended. Bang! An expanse of space was obliterated. However, Mo Yen was completely unharmed. Yi Xian was stunned. "He's fine? He's completely unharmed? Exactly what expanse of space is Mo Yen in?" Mo Yen gazed at Yi Xian. "Are you stunned? Do you know how many layers of space there are? Obviously you don't." As soon as he finished speaking, he pressed his right hand down lightly. Bang! Yi Xian didn't even have the time to react before his figure plummeted straight down. At this moment he seemed as if he was falling through a river of stars. There was no destination, and he just kept falling while a formidable force ceaselessly tore at his body. Moreover, his invincible sword physique was dissipating bit by bit at this moment. There was a trace of disbelief in Mo Yan's eyes as he gazed at Yi Xian, who was falling incessantly. Under normal circumstances, a single thought from him was sufficient to obliterate a figure at Yi Xian's realm of cultivation. However, this human in front of him was actually able to exchange several blows with him. Even now he had sent Yi Xian into the abyss of space and time, yet this fellow still hadn't died. This human could actually reach such a level. Right at this moment, Yi Xian in the abyss of space and time suddenly roared angrily. His entire body directly turned into a bloody person. Crazy demon bloodline. Yi Xian opened his right hand, and the green profound sword suddenly turned into a bloody light as it slashed out. Bang! That abyss of space and time was directly torn apart. At the same time, a flying sword appeared below Yi Xian, forcefully holding him back. Yi Xian's body turned around, and both feet stood on the sword. However, at this moment he was still falling straight down, unable to stop at all. That Mo Yan was right in front of him, but the two of them weren't in the same space-time. He was being suppressed by space-time. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the green profound sword returned to his hand. He slowly closed his eyes, and in the next moment, he held the green profound sword with both hands and fiercely slashed. Bang! In an instant, the space-time he was in began to directly shatter. Yi Xian found the right opportunity, and directly used the green profound sword to directly return to the current space-time of the universe. As soon as he returned to the current space-time of the universe, he discovered that his physical body was gone. His physical body couldn't withstand passing through a space-time that was too powerful. Right now he was only left with his soul. Chapter 1861. He couldn't beat him. Even if he used all his strength, he was still suppressed by his opponent. He was suppressed in all aspects. There was no chance. Mo Yan looked at Yi Xian. Call for help? Sure. Yi Xian looked at the azure profound sword in his hand, slowly closed his eyes, and whispered in his heart, Qing-er? No response. Yi Xian frowned, saying again, Qing-er? The azure profound sword still didn't respond. It's over. Qing-er really didn't pay attention to me anymore. Yi Xian was somewhat unwilling, saying again, Qing-er? Still no response. It's over. In the distance, Mo Yan suddenly said, Where are you? Yi Xian took out Xiao Ta. Xiao Ta, I want to summon the ancestor. After a moment of silence, Xiao Ta said, Summon it. Yi Xian's face darkened. How do I summon it? Xiao Ta was somewhat puzzled. How do I know? I'm just a pagoda. Yi Xian was speechless. F***ck, now you know you're just a pagoda. At this time, Mo Yan suddenly said, Where are you? Yi Xian pondered for a moment, then he urged his bloodline power, whispering in his heart, Dad? No response. Yi Xian's face darkened. This time it's over. Mo Yan suddenly laughed. Looks like you can't summon it. As his voice fell, he lightly swept his right hand, and with this sweep, the space where Yi Xian was actually undulated like waves. And within that undulated space, Yi Xian's expression changed greatly. At this moment, he felt his soul was about to be torn apart. Death. At this moment, he once again felt the aura of death. It had been a long time since he faced death so closely. Despair? Indeed, a little despair. He had already used all his strength and all his trump cards, but the gap between him and Mo Yan was too big. This was not a powerhouse he could fight against. Therefore he had the idea to call for help. But this time he didn't call anyone. Qing-er did not respond. His father did not respond. At this moment he understood that he could only rely on himself. Thinking of this, Yi Xian smiled. In fact, he had understood this principle many years ago. When he was in Qingqing, he knew that he could only rely on himself. At that time he could only rely on himself. In the end, he had Qing-er, his father, and someone he could rely on. As a result, he developed a sense of dependence. Failure? He had never failed. Because every time he was about to fail, either his father or Qing-er would appear. But now they did not appear. When they didn't appear, he realized how useless he was in the face of real difficulties. Useless? Before this, even though he knew that the god race was powerful, he wasn't afraid at all. What? Because he had Qing-er and his father. Qing-er and his father were so powerful, could the god race even withstand a single strike from them? Of course not. Qing-er and his father were undefeatable. Yi Xian was fearless. He even looked down on the god race. However, he had forgotten one thing. Qing-er and his father were undefeatable, able to kill the god race. But Yi Xian was not one of them. He asked himself without Qing'er and his father what was he? What was he? To the god race he was but an ant, one that could be stomped to death at any time. The truth was cruel. But very real. Complain? He didn't complain. He just felt that he hadn't worked hard enough. At this moment of life and death, many thoughts flashed through his mind like sparks. Not long ago he knew that he could only rely on himself. But now he truly felt that he could only rely on himself. Understanding and experiencing were two different concepts. Death. He knew that he couldn't escape death. But he wasn't going to sit here and wait for death. Just as his soul was about to be torn to shreds, he slashed forward with the profound azure sword. Seeking death. He had never wanted to use this sword technique. Because he wasn't his big brother. His big brother used this sword technique to show off, but if he used it he would really die. As Yi Xian swung his sword, the rippling space-time around him began to vanish bit by bit. This was his strongest sword technique. Seeking death. Boom. The space-time around him suddenly split apart. In the next moment, Mo Yen retreated hundreds of meters. The experts of the divine clan who were hiding in the dark frowned when they saw this scene. This human actually repelled Mo Yen? Not far away Yi Xian slowly fell, his soul fading away. Although he had repelled Mo Yen, he hadn't completely withstood Mo Yan's space-time power. Mo Yen looked at Yi Xian who was about to disappear in shock. Yi Xian's strength could not be said to be weak, because the current Yi Xian was too young. But what shocked him was the sword skills of Yi Xian. Yi Xian's sword technique had shattered his space-time suppression. Was this a sword technique created by a human? Mo Yen was shocked. Just as Yi Xian was about to disappear, a woman suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. She was Yanji. Yanji waved her lily-white hand and a mysterious power enveloped Yi Xian. Then she turned to look at Mo Yen. Patriarch, this person can't die for now. He has extremely high research value. Apart from that, we can also use him to investigate the two people behind him. Those two people have been hiding. If Yi Xian dies, I'm afraid they won't appear. Mo Yen nodded after a moment of silence. Okay. Saying that, he glanced at Yi Xian's soul. However, you have to be careful of this person. Yanji smiled. Don't worry. I will set up many restrictions in his body. Mo Yen nodded. He glanced at the human universe below and frowned. Destroy it. Yanji suddenly said, Patriarch, wait. Mo Yen looked at Yanji. Yanji smiled. I don't think there's a need to rush. Mo Yen frowned. Why? Yanji smiled. Yi Xian wants to protect these humans. If I want him to give in, I think I can use these humans to threaten him. Not only can I threaten him, but I can also threaten the two people behind him. We can set up a formation here first. When Yi Xian and the people behind him are no longer useful, we can destroy them. In any case, the humans below can't do anything. Mo Yen thought for a moment and said, okay. He was also interested in the sword techniques that Yi Xian had just used. Those weren't ordinary sword techniques. The person who could create such sword techniques was definitely not an ordinary person. As Yanji said, Yi Xian and the people behind him had extremely high research value. Soon the gods retreated. Yanji looked at Yi Xian's soul in the distance and smiled. You're in my hands. What goes around comes around. Saying that, she took Yi Xian away. God Race, God College. Divinity College was the only college of the celestial race. It was the dream of countless celestials. Because one could change one's fate here. Every race had a hierarchy and the God race had it too. Only by entering the God College and learning about the God civilization could one change one's fate. Ji College. This was Yanji's college. As a teacher, and a great teacher at that, she was qualified to have a college of her own. Inside the college, Yi Xian sat on the ground. At this moment, his body had recovered. In front of him was Yanji. Yanji sized Yi Xian up and said with a smile, I've set 360 divine technique restrictions in your body. With your current strength, you definitely won't be able to undo them. Yi Xian slowly lay down. He used his hands as a pillow. No one knew what he was thinking. Yanji looked at Yi Xian. What's wrong? Are you shocked? Yi Xian shook his head. I just didn't expect you to still be alive. Yanji blinked. Then shouldn't you thank me? Yi Xian looked at Yanji. What do you want to know? The corner of Yanji's mouth raised slightly. You're really a smart person. Saying that, she opened her palm. Xiao Ta and Qing Xian's sword appeared in her hand. Yi Xian said, You didn't hand it in? Yanji smiled. No. Yi Xian smiled. You want to keep it all for yourself? Yanji said, Wrong? Yi Xian frowned. Wrong? Yanji said, The reason why I'm interested in these two things is that they contain extremely high knowledge. I'm only interested in knowledge. Saying that, she pointed to the surroundings. Look around. These are all books that I wrote. Many of them are my research works. Yi Xian looked around. There were many bookshelves. There were at least hundreds of thousands of books on the bookshelves. Yanji said again, my God race has been researching the Tao of space-time for our entire lives. The higher our attainments in space-time, the stronger our strength. Do you still remember the battle between you and the Patriarch? Yi Xian nodded. Yanji smiled. Do you know why you lost so miserably? Yi Xian said, strength suppression. Yanji nodded. It's strength suppression. More accurately, it's space-time suppression. He used space-time suppression on you. Do you know how many layers of space-time there are? Yi Xian shook his head. Yanji chuckled. Currently, it's known that there are 6 layers of space-time. However, God race can at most cultivate to the 4th layer. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why can only cultivate to the 4th layer? Yanji knew. Because the 5th layer is multidimensional space-time. Once you enter multidimensional space-time, it's equivalent to overlapping multiple universes. Ordinary people can't withstand that kind of space-time pressure. Furthermore, you can't forcefully enter the 5th layer of space-time. Because the 5th layer of space-time is a spatial enchantment. If you forcefully barge in, you'll be attacked by the space-time dimension. Even a rank 9 expert can't block this kind of space-time attack. Of course, if you can grasp this Tao of space-time, it also means that you can use the power of multidimensional space-time to attack the enemy. Unfortunately, until now, no one has entered this kind of space-time. Even some rank 9 peak experts only dare to look at this kind of space-time from afar and don't dare to touch it. Yi Xian glanced at Yanji. Don't dare to touch the 5th layer of space-time. Then how do you know about the 6th layer of space-time? Yanji smiled. Guessing. Yi Xian frowned. Guessing? There's no evidence? Yanji blinked. The exploration of the divine way all starts from guesses, then we slowly go and verify our own guesses. Of course, this process will be very difficult. Yi Xian said in a low voice, in other words, there might be 7, 8, or even 100 layers of time and space? Yanji said seriously, why is it impossible? Not to mention the history of the human race, even the history of the celestial race was only 800 trillion years. But do you know how many trillions of years of history our universe has? It had a history of at least 10,000 trillion years. Whether it is a human or a god, they are as insignificant as a speck of dust in the entire universe. Yi Xian had a headache. Damn it, what was he in the universe? Chapter 1862. Actually, Yi Xian was quite shocked. He used to only know how to cultivate and had never explored the origin of the universe or anything like that. If he didn't investigate, he wouldn't know. Now that he knew, he was shocked. What did humans and gods count for in this endless universe? At this moment, he really felt that he was somewhat insignificant. At this moment, Yanji said, do you know why I'm interested in your sword and this Xiaota? Yi Xian withdrew his thoughts and looked at Yanji. Space-time Tao? Yanji nodded and smiled. Space-time Tao. As she said, she took out the green profound sword. Previously, when you fought with the Patriarch, he sent you into the space-time abyss. That is equivalent to 3 layers of space-time. Moreover, it is the most dangerous place in the 3 layers of space-time. There are no pressure points there. Ordinary people would definitely die if they entered. But you, this fellow, ran out. How could you escape? Because of this sword. And the reason why this sword could bring you out, that means that the person who made this sword is at least proficient in 3 layers of space-time. Yi Xian was silent. He did rely on the green profound sword to escape. As if he thought of something, he suddenly asked, the space-time that I fell into, that was the space-time abyss? Yanji nodded. Space-time abyss. Every layer of space-time has a dangerous place, and the space-time abyss can be said to be the most dangerous place in every layer of space-time. As she said, she glanced at Yi Xian. You were able to escape from there. This is really abnormal. Because in that space-time abyss, you were suppressed by space-time. Under normal circumstances, it was completely impossible for you to escape. However, you still escaped. As she said this, she glanced at the green profound sword in her hand with a trace of seriousness in her eyes. I feel that I might have underestimated the strength of the person who made this sword. Yi Xian was silent. Space-time abyss. Regarding that place, he indeed had some lingering fear when he thought about it. Yanji smiled. Let's get down to business. Let's start with your sword. Let me ask you a question. Was this sword made by your sister? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Yanji knew. Then do you know how strong she is? Yi Xian shook his head. I really don't know. Yanji smiled. It doesn't matter. You will know soon. Yi Xian looked at Yanji. Why? Yanji waved the azure profound sword. Later I will need your cooperation. I want to see the limit of this sword. Its limit represents the strength of the plain-dressed woman. Yanji knew. I need to see it. Yan knew. I'm going to open a spatial tunnel now. I'll bring you in with me and then you can use this sword. I want to see if we can reach the fourth layer of spacetime. Yi Xian thought about it and nodded. Yi Xian. Yanji waved her right hand lightly. In an instant, the space in front of her transformed into a vortex, and then a spatial tunnel appeared within the vortex. To Xian. Yen to be to Xian to it, Tino teat. Yi to say to Yi Xian, T to say to be. Yi, don't to go titelo. I Xian to Xian not do to be said to be at. Yanji nodded, that's good. With that, she brought Yi Xian into the spacetime whirlpool. Soon they were in the spacetime tunnel. During the process, Yi Xian looked around curiously. They were in the third spacetime tunnel. He had once entered this place with the green profound sword, but he didn't expect this place to be a spacetime tunnel. Yanji suddenly said, this spacetime tunnel was opened by my divine race. Any cultivator of my divine race who wants to enter the fourth spacetime can go through this spacetime tunnel. It's like a shortcut. Even if an ordinary person enters the third spacetime tunnel, they won't be able to find the way to the fourth spacetime tunnel and might even lose themselves. Of course, even with this shortcut, it doesn't mean that one can enter the fourth spacetime tunnel for sure. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Yanji said, you'll know soon enough. Yi Xian nodded and didn't ask any more questions. Soon the two arrived in front of a spacetime black hole. Yi Xian looked up and saw an endless black hole. He couldn't see anything but it contained an extremely mysterious power. Seeing this power, his face became solemn. He had encountered this power before. When he first entered this spacetime tunnel with the green profound sword, he felt a very dangerous power. It was the power in front of him. Yanji's expression was also somewhat solemn. The spacetime black hole is more dangerous than the spacetime abyss. And through this we can enter the fourth spacetime tunnel. With that she looked at Yi Xian. You go in. Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. What about you? Yanji blinked. You go in first. When there's nothing else. You come out to pick me up. *CK. Yi Xian was a little angry. What if I can't come out after I go in? Yanji said, I'll take good care of your tower. Yi Xian was speechless. Yanji pointed at the spacetime black hole. Go in. Don't you want to know how strong your sister is? Yi Xian looked at the spacetime black hole. After a moment, he looked at the green profound sword in his hand. Without thinking too much, he turned into a sword light and entered the spacetime black hole. Seeing this scene, Yanji suddenly became a little nervous. Of course, she wasn't worried about Yi Xian's life. She was worried that this sword couldn't bring Yi Xian into the fourth spacetime tunnel. Because if that was the case, it meant that the plain-dressed woman's strength was at most level 8. And if Yi Xian could enter, it meant that the plain-dressed woman's strength had most likely reached level 9. Yanji stared at the spacetime black hole. Could this guy come out alive? As if thinking of something, she suddenly frowned. Oh no, I forgot to tell this guy not to wander around in there. He might get lost. This guy wouldn't wander around randomly, right? When Yi Xian entered the spacetime black hole, the mysterious power in the spacetime black hole actually retreated rapidly. Yi Xian was not surprised. Because these mysterious power had encountered him before and these mysterious power didn't dare to approach him at all. Yi Xian shuttled all the way. Not long after, he passed through the spacetime black hole and arrived at the fourth spacetime tunnel. Yi Xian looked around. The surroundings were silent and there was nothing. He felt a little uneasy. Although he had entered the fourth spacetime tunnel, he still couldn't control the spacetime power of the fourth spacetime tunnel. Entering and controlling were two completely different concepts. Yi Xian glanced around. He couldn't see the third spacetime tunnel from here. It seemed that he had to go back and fool Yanji. Yanji definitely knew how to control the fourth spacetime tunnel. Thinking of this, he was about to go back, but at this moment he frowned. Wasn't there still the fifth spacetime tunnel? Why didn't he try it himself? Since he said he would try, he would try. Yi Xian urged the green profound sword and directly turned into a sword light and shot into the distance. At the beginning he was still a little excited. The fifth spacetime tunnel. If he could enter it and learn how to control the spacetime power, wouldn't he be invincible? One had to know that no one from the divine race had been able to enter it until now. After an hour, Yi Xian frowned. Because he found that after shuttling for an hour, there was still dead silence around him. There was nothing. What the hell? Another hour passed and Yi Xian's face completely darkened. He found that he seemed to be lost. I'm lost. Damn it. He couldn't find his bearings anymore. Because he wanted to go back, but he found that he couldn't find the way back no matter how he turned around. Yi Xian looked at the green profound sword. Little soul, do you know the way back? Little soul said, young master, you don't know? Yi Xian, little soul smiled awkwardly. Young master, Sister Qin, transformed me, but I don't know what she transformed. I'm also very helpless. As she said, although she had been transformed by Qin, there was too much knowledge involved, and she didn't know about these knowledge points. She didn't care. Anyway, she just had to devour it. Why should she care so much? Wasn't that what the young master should care about? Yi Xian was completely speechless. Little Soul and Xiao Ta were both open-minded. What should he do now? Yi Xian looked at the dead silence around him and felt a headache. Could it be that he couldn't go back just like that? Without thinking much, he continued to move forward on his sword. Keep moving forward. There must be a way out. Outside. Yan Ji frowned. Why isn't there any movement from this guy? It had been a day since Yi Xian had gone in. And Yi Xian didn't move at all. As if thinking of something, Yan Ji looked at Xiao Ta in his hand. Xiao Ta, is your master still alive? Xiao Ta was silent for a moment. Alive? Jingji was puzzled. Why are you so sure? Xiao Ta said. Because our universe still exists. So, he must still be alive. Jingji was puzzled. Does his survival have anything to do with our universe? Xiao Ta sighed softly. This silly woman. Don't you know that my young master is linked to the survival of the universe? If the young master is really dead, will this universe still exist? Yanji said again. Xiao Ta, if your master is dead, can you recognize me as your master? I can give you something better. Xiao Ta hesitated for a moment. What's better? Yanji quickly said. For example, status. I can make you the first pagoda of the god race. In the future you will be called God Pagoda. The name Xiao Ta is too vulgar. God Pagoda sounds much better. Not only that, I can also transform you and make you more powerful. Xiao Ta was silent. Yanji smiled. How about it? Xiao Ta thought for a moment. I can think about it. Yanji nodded. Sure. Saying that, she looked at the pitch-black spacetime black hole. What did you mean by what you said just now? It means that our universe still exists, so he is still alive. Xiao Ta said. I understand. Yanji was speechless. P.S. Chapter 1863. Yanji was speechless. Is there something wrong with this Xiao Ta's IQ? It's hard to communicate with him. Yanji stopped talking nonsense with Xiao Ta and turned to look at the spacetime black hole. Is that guy alive or dead? At this moment, Yi Xian was completely confused. He was really lost. He had been running on his sword for a day, but he still couldn't see the exit. He was lost in this universe's spacetime. How do I get out? He was a little confused. This was a pain in the ass. Yi Xian glanced around. The surrounding spacetime was silent. There was no sound at all. It was like a dead zone. He was still in the fourth spacetime, but he didn't know which area he was in. How do I go back? He wasn't thinking about going to the fifth spacetime, but how to go back. After a while, he disappeared into the distance on his sword. Just like that, he shuttled through the vast fourth spacetime for a few days. During these few days, he didn't find anything. At this moment, he was a little annoyed. He wasn't afraid of danger. He was afraid of nothing. Because in this spacetime, he couldn't feel the passage of time. Every moment seemed to be the same. Loneliness. He felt like he was the only person in the whole world. When he noticed that he was a little annoyed, he frowned. Why was he annoyed? Was there something wrong with his sword heart? After a while, Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He had to say that this lonely place was really suitable for settling himself. Because he could only calm down. Yi Xian simply sat down. Since he couldn't find a way out, he might as well sit down and calm down and think about it. The more he wanted to go out, the more annoyed he would be. And the more annoyed he was, the easier it was to cause problems. After sitting down, Yi Xian began to think. For spacetime. What was the difference between here and outside? He directly displayed his sword domain to cover the surroundings. After displaying the sword domain, he could feel this spacetime more clearly. He began to study this spacetime instead of rushing out. He wasn't busy now anyway. Just like that, time passed bit by bit. With the help of the sword domain, he began to try to integrate with this spacetime. It was naturally impossible in the beginning. Even with the assistance of the sword domain, he was unable to fuse into one with this expanse of space. But gradually he realized that he could use the green profound sword to merge with this spacetime. Because he noticed that this space didn't reject the green profound sword. He could use the green profound sword as a medium to merge with this spacetime. Because he could become one with the green profound sword. He had to admit that this discovery made him somewhat excited. However, he didn't dare to be careless because he didn't understand this spacetime at all. He was afraid that he would play himself to death. But fortunately, with the green profound sword, this spacetime was very respectful. Just like that, Yi Xian slowly merged himself with this spacetime, and when he did, he was stunned. Because he discovered that the exit was right in front of him. Oh, it should be said that there was an exit everywhere. Before he was trapped in spacetime. But now he was one with spacetime. Therefore he could leave this spacetime at any time. Apart from that, he could also use this spacetime. Of course, he had to rely on the Azure Profound Sword. If he did not use the Green Mysterious Sword, this spacetime would not care about him at all. This made him a little embarrassed. He was actually less respected than the Green Mysterious Sword. Yi Xian put away the Green Mysterious Sword and looked around. He didn't plan to leave, he wanted to go to the legendary 5th spacetime to take a look. He did as he said. He arrived at the end of the 4th spacetime, and when he arrived he frowned. At the end of the 4th spacetime was a void. A void? Yi Xian was about to enter when the green profound sword suddenly trembled. Yi Xian looked at the green profound sword. Little Soul said, "Young master, it's dangerous." Yi Xian frowned slightly. Dangerous? Little Soul said, "Yes. It's very dangerous, don't go in." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Is it dangerous with you here?" Little Soul said, "I'm not in danger, but you are." Yi Xian, Little Soul continued, "I can feel that it contains an extremely terrifying power, and it's not something you can withstand right now." Terrifying power? Yi Xian looked at the void. Could it be the spacetime pressure that Yanji mentioned? Spacetime pressure. In this 5th spacetime, there were multiple dimensions of spacetime, and multiple dimensions of spacetime contained multiple spacetime pressures. Yi Xian took another look at the void and then he turned around and left. He naturally wouldn't risk his life. Yanji, who was waiting, suddenly looked up into the distance. From the spacetime black hole, a man slowly walked out. It was Yi Xian. Yanji blinked. "You're still alive." Yi Xian smiled. "You want me to die?" Yanji smiled slightly. "What are you saying? Of course I want you to live." As she said that, her smile gradually disappeared. "You went into the 4th spacetime?" Yi Xian shook his head. "No." Yanji frowned slightly. "No." Yi Xian nodded. "After I entered that spacetime black hole, the spacetime pressure in that spacetime black hole was too strong. I didn't dare to go any deeper." Yanji looked at Yi Xian. "Really?" Yi Xian nodded. "Really? If you don't believe me, I can swear." Yanji immediately said, "Then swear." Yi Xian said seriously, "I swear on my father, if what I said is false, let him be. Forget it." Yanji suddenly shook his head. "You unfilial son." Yi Xian, Yanji said again, "Since you didn't go to the 4th spacetime, why did you stay for so long?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "It was too dark inside, I got lost." Yanji stared at Yi Xian. "Really?" Yi Xian said seriously, "If you don't believe me, I can swear." Yanji, Yi Xian said, "Miss Yanji, after knowing each other for so long, you should be very clear about my character. I can bleed and my head can be broken, but it's absolutely impossible for me to say anything against my heart." Yanji glanced at Yi Xian. "Why do I feel like you're bluffing?" Yi Xian, Yanji said again, "If you didn't go in, then you didn't go in. Anyway, I don't think it's possible to go in. Not to mention your sister, even the patriarch spent countless years before he could enter." Saying that, she laughed. She was a little happy. Because Yi Xian didn't enter the 4th spacetime, it meant that the woman's strength hadn't reached phase 9. At most she was phase 8. This wasn't a bad thing for the divine race. Thinking of this, she glanced at Yi Xian. "You stay here first, don't run around because the divine race isn't that friendly to humans, understand?" Yi Xian said with a smile, "I see." Yanji nodded. "You're a smart person, it's good that you understand." Saying that, she turned and left. Inside the hall, the corners of Yi Xian's mouth rose slightly. He was currently at phase 7, but his strength had far exceeded phase 7. There was a gap between him and phase 9, but phase 9 shouldn't think about suppressing him. because the space-time dimension suppression had no effect on him. It could be said that he stood on the same level as Phase 9 powerhouses. Of course, this didn't mean that he was a Phase 9 powerhouse. In short, he wouldn't be unable to fight back against a Phase 9 powerhouse now. As if thinking of something, he sat down cross-legged and sank his consciousness into his body. He glanced and his face darkened. Damn. That woman really put more than 300 kinds of restrictions in his body. Was this woman crazy? Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Little soul, can you break these restrictions?" Little soul said, "Of course. Do you need to break them now?" Yi Xian thought about it and said, "Not now. If he broke them now, it would alert that woman." He couldn't face the entire god race head-on. Soul suddenly became excited and said, "Young lord, I feel a lot of powerful souls. Should we go and absorb them?" Yi Xian's face darkened. "Little soul, I feel many powerful souls, should we go absorb them?" Little soul giggled. "Little soul, I miss Sister Qing." Yi Xian said with a smile, "I miss her too." Little soul said, "Young master, I have a plan. Do you want to hear it?" Yi Xian was curious. "What plan?" Little soul said seriously, "Let me stay with Sister Qing, for a while, then I'll come back for you." Yi Xian's face darkened. "Do you think I'm too weak?" Little soul quickly said, "No, no. I just want to become stronger and help you, young master. If I stay with Sister Qing for a while, Sister Qing's temper will be irritable, and she will point to a place and then cut down with her sword. In a few days, I'll definitely become very strong. At that time, I'll be able to help you." Yi Xian, Little Soul said again, "I'm one with young master, I absolutely have no thoughts of despising young master. Young master, you know that?" Yi Xian laughed. "Of course I know." As Little Soul said, Little Soul really wanted to help him. Yi Xian sighed. "I also want to follow Qing but," saying that, she shook her head. Intuition told him that he couldn't follow Qing too often. What? Because after being with Qing for a long time, he always felt that everyone else was an ant. This idea was very scary. At this moment, Yanji suddenly walked in. She walked in front of Yi Xian and said with a smile, "I'll take you to a place." Yi Xian was a little curious. What place? Yanji knew. The academic exchange. Yi Xian was a little puzzled. "Why are you taking me to the academic exchange?" Yanji said with a smile. "I want to take you to see what a higher civilization is. After you see it, you'll find out how great our divine race is. And that sister of yours, she's as small as an ant in front of our divine race civilization." At this time, Xiaota suddenly said, "If you say that, I, Xiaota, will not accept it. Miss Yanji, I advise you to be kind." "Really?" Chapter 1864. Xiaota was not convinced. Yanji laughed. "You are not convinced because you are not knowledgeable enough. I don't blame you." Xiaota was speechless. Yanji looked at Yi Xian. "Let's go." Yi Xian waved the green profound sword in his hand. "Miss Yanji, can you make this sword?" Yanji looked at Yi Xian. "No." Yi Xian smiled. "But Qing can." Then he walked out of the hall. Yanji was silent. She knew what Yi Xian meant. After a while, she turned and left. Led by Yanji, Yi Xian arrived in front of an academic palace. At the moment, many scholars of the Divinity College had gathered there. Academic exchange. In the God race, there would be an academic exchange every year. On the surface, it was for improvement, but in reality, it was for showing off. When Yanji and Yi Xian arrived, many people's eyes fell on Yi Xian and Yanji. To be precise, they were looking at Yi Xian. Human. When they saw Yi Xian, many of the divine scholars were filled with curiosity. Human. This was a rare thing. Soon many people surrounded them. Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, a man suddenly smiled. "Instructor Yanji, is this the human you brought back from the human world?" Yanji smiled. "Why? Instructor Gong Zhuang is interested in him?" The man named Gong Zhuang smiled. "Of course I am." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian and smiled. "I never thought that humans would develop to this day and form their own unique civilization. The Tao of life is really mysterious." At this moment, a celestial lady at the side smiled and said, "Indeed. I heard that there are humans who have jumped out of the rules set by us. I have to say, humans are amazing." Yi Xian glanced at the divine lady who had spoken. He was a little surprised. Originally, he thought that when he arrived, these gods would mock him or look down on him. After all, the human race was created by the divine race. These gods would definitely be high and mighty. But he didn't. These gods in front of him didn't have that kind of arrogant attitude. This surprised him a little. At this moment, Yanji looked at the female god and smiled. Instructor Yuan Qing, I heard that you are very interested in humans and have been researching them? The girl named Yuan Qing nodded. I've done some research. As she spoke, she glanced at Yi Xian and said with a smile, actually, humans are really outstanding because their ability to learn is very terrifying. Moreover, just like my god race, they also like to explore the unknown. If it weren't for the restriction we set up, the human race would have developed far more. Even so, some of them seem to have broken through the restrictions we set up. At this point, a trace of worry flashed in her eyes. The man called Gong Zhuang smiled and said, Yuan Qing, are you worried that this human will become a great enemy of ours in the future? Yuan Qing smiled and said, they already are. Gong Zhuang shook his head. If the human race continues to develop, they will indeed become our great enemy. However, for now they shouldn't be a threat to us. Even if there are 1 or 2 special humans, they will only be 1 or 2. They won't be a real threat to us. Our god race's 80 billion years of history isn't something humans can overturn. Yuan Qing smiled and said, that's true, but we shouldn't look down on any civilization, especially humans who have such a strong learning ability. Gong Zhuang nodded. Indeed, we shouldn't look down on them. In fact, we should eliminate them as soon as possible to prevent future disasters. As he spoke, he suddenly looked at Yanji and said, Instructor Yanji, I heard that you suggested to the Patriarch to let the humans go for now? Yanji nodded. Right now, humans are still of some use. At this point, she glanced at Yi Xian and said with a smile, I think what Yuan Qing said is very true. Some humans are really outstanding. Young Master Yi, can you show us your sword? Yi Xian smiled and said, sure. As he spoke, he opened his palm and the azure profound sword flew to the center of the crowd. When the divine scholars saw the azure profound sword, they were all shocked. Gradually, the expressions of the divine scholars turned solemn. Yuan Qing walked to the azure profound sword and touched it lightly. After a while, she said in a deep voice, which god made this sword? Yanji smiled and said, it's not a god, it's made by a human. Yuan Qing turned to look at Yanji and frowned, a human? On the battlefield, all the gods were slightly shocked. Yanji nodded, it's a human. Yuan Qing looked at Yi Xian. He made it? Yi Xian was just about to nod when Yanji suddenly smiled and said, it's his younger sister. Younger sister. Yuan Qing said in a deep voice, where is his younger sister now? Yanji blinked and asked, what do you want to do? Yuan Qing shook her head. Yanji's eyes flashed with a trace of complexity. Yanji, this sword involves the Tao of spacetime. It's profound. Yanji nodded, I know. That's why I brought it here for you to see. Yuan Qing said softly, a human can actually understand the Tao of spacetime to such a degree. I have to say, this is really terrifying. She looked at Yanji, the woman in the plain dress who is wanted by our god tribe, is she the one who made this sword? Yanji nodded. Yuan Qing said in a deep voice, tell the Patriarch to keep her alive. This woman has great research value. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. These gods attached great importance to this azure profound sword, but they did not pay enough attention to Qing'er. Research Qing'er? He did not know what level Qing'er had reached, but he knew that Qing'er's strength definitely surpassed the god tribe. Thinking of this, Yi Xian suddenly asked, Xiao Ta, what level do you think Qing'er has reached? Xiao Ta had been with Dad for a long time, so he should have a better understanding. After a moment of silence, Xiao Ta said, the ceiling. Yi Xian frowned, the ceiling? Xiao Ta said, everyone knows. Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, Yuan Qing suddenly looked at Yi Xian. Human, can you let me study this sword for a while? Yi Xian smiled, you have to ask Miss Yanji about this. Yanji immediately kept the azure profound sword and glared at Yuan Qing. This sword and this human belong to me now. Yuan Qing said in a deep voice, study it for a month. After a month I will return it to you untouched. Yanji shook her head, no. Yuan Qing said again, 10 days. After a moment of silence, Yanji said, all right, but I need your insights on the spacetime matter theory. Hearing this, the gods were speechless. This woman was too cunning. That was Yuan Qing's lifetime of research. After a moment of silence, Yuan Qing said, all right. As she spoke, she opened her palm, and a thick ancient book appeared before Yanji. Yanji chuckled, put the book away and then passed the azure profound sword to Yuan Qing. 10 days it is. As soon as she finished speaking, she glanced at the surroundings and said, are all of you interested in this human? He's very formidable and he knows a lot of human knowledge. If all of you want to understand humans, you can ask him. Yi Xian smiled. She wants to rent him out. Meanwhile, a woman from the god race suddenly smiled. I'm slightly interested. Yi Xian gazed at her, and the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. Human, I'm very interested in the way you humans reproduce. We can talk about it in detail. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, I'm interested in the way you humans reproduce as well. We can talk about it in detail. All the gods were speechless. In the end, Yi Xian wasn't able to talk about it in detail with the woman, because Yanji wouldn't allow it. She was afraid that something would happen between Yi Xian and the woman from the god race because it was against ethics. In the following time, the group of divine human scholars started to discuss, while Yi Xian listened quietly at the side. Even though he could enter the fourth layer of space now, there were many things that he didn't understand, especially the space-time Tao. Yi Xian's expression gradually became solemn, because he noticed that the scholars from the god race were very formidable. Perhaps they weren't very strong, but they were very knowledgeable. Especially when it came to knowledge, they knew a lot of details. They were a group that specialized in researching the future for the god race. That was exactly why the scholars from the god race had such a high status in the god race. But the humans didn't have such a group of scholars. Suddenly, a voice resounded from the side. Where are the humans? Where are the humans? Hearing this, everyone turned to look. Not far away, a young god walked over with a smile. Seeing this god, the group of divine scholars frowned. The young god's gaze landed on Yi Xian and he smiled. You're a human? Yi Xian smiled. Yes. The young god sized up Yi Xian and shook his head. You're indeed a lowly creature. You're so ugly. Yi Xian blinked his eyes. Who are you talking about, lowly creature? The young god immediately said, I'm talking about you. Yi Xian said with a smile, that is exactly what a lowly creature is talking about. The other gods. The young god was stunned. Very quickly, his face turned ferocious. You dare to humiliate me. Yi Xian went forward and gave him a slap. Bah. Before anyone could react, the young god was sent flying tens of feet away. The other gods were stunned. Why did he suddenly attack? Beside Yi Xian, Yanji said in a low voice, How can you hit a god? Yi Xian said angrily, He humiliated you. The other gods were stunned. Humiliated us? Did he? Yanji looked at Yi Xian. Wasn't he humiliating you humans? How did he become humiliating us? Yi Xian said, Were humans created by the gods? Yanji nodded, yes. Yi Xian said, Then when he humiliated humans, isn't that the same as humiliating the gods? The other gods. Yanji frowned. Isn't there something wrong with your logical thinking? Yi Xian suddenly said, Are you unhappy with him too? Yanji said, I don't like him, but, at this point she suddenly stopped. What did she say? At this moment Yi Xian suddenly said, If you don't like him, that means I don't like him too. Miss Yanji, don't worry, if there's anything, I will bear it alone. As he said that, he charged in front of the man and punched him in the face. Bang! The god was sent flying once again. And Yi Xian rushed over again, shouting as he hit, Who asked you to make Miss Yanji angry? Let me tell you, if there's anything, come at me, don't make Miss Yanji angry. On the other side, Yuanqing looked at Yanji. Yanji, we all don't like him, but don't you think it's a bit too much to let a human hit him like that? Yanji. P.S. Some people say that I don't update enough. Actually, I want to say that no matter how fast the author writes, it can't compare to the speed at which the readers read. For example, if I write 10 chapters, it might take a few days, but you can finish it in a few minutes. The reader is the field, the author is the cow, there are only bad cows, there are no bad fields. And some readers think that I don't update enough, so they crazily scold me. I read the book reviews every day, really, sometimes I'm speechless. Why are some of my readers so angry? They're so angry that they want to kill me. Nowadays the anger on the internet is too strong. To be honest, I've been reading the book reviews recently and I'm getting a little depressed. This problem won't get better without a few hundred votes. Do as you see fit. Chapter 1865. In the distance, Yi Xian was still beating up the male god and had no intention of stopping. Yuanqing glanced at Yanji. Tell him to stop. Yanji came back to her senses and quickly pulled Yi Xian back. She was a little angry. Do you know who he is? Yi Xian blinked. No matter who he is, as long as you don't like him, I will beat him up. Yanji stared at Yi Xian. You want to frame me? Yi Xian shook his head and was a little disappointed. Miss Yanji, am I such a person in your heart? Yanji said in a cold voice. You're dishonest. Yi Xian was about to speak, but at this moment, the male god who was being beaten suddenly said angrily, "Yanji, you bitch, how dare you instigate your people to beat me up, you?" Yi Xian flew into a rage. "How dare you insult teacher Yanji, die!" As soon as his voice fell, he suddenly rushed out. Boom. Before the male god could react, his head was directly smashed by a punch. At this moment, everyone was dumbfounded. Directly killed? Yanji's face was a little pale and she said with a trembling voice, "You?" Yi Xian looked at Yanji. "He insulted you." Yanji said angrily, "Do you know who he is?" "He is the vice dean's grandson." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "Second generation?" Yanji glared at Yi Xian. "Yes, he is a second generation." Yi Xian was a little disdainful. Yi Xian looked down on this kind of second generation the most in my life." Xiao Ta suddenly said, "Young lord, before you speak, can you use your brain?" Yi Xian. In front of Yi Xian, Yanji said in a deep voice, "You idiot, you think you can act recklessly just because you don't like it? Without strength and background, don't talk about acting recklessly. Even if you want to do a good deed, you have to think twice first." Yi Xian frowned. "Is your god race so complicated?" Yanji was just about to speak when an extremely terrifying pressure suddenly swept over from afar. Seeing this, the expressions of the divine scholars became serious. At this moment, an old true god appeared in front of everyone. The person who had just arrived was none other than Gao Qi, the vice president of the School of Divinity. Gao Ke's gaze fell on Yi Xian. "Did you kill him?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." Gao Ke's eyes narrowed slightly. "Who gave you the guts?" As he said that, he looked at Yanji. "Is that you, Mentor Yanji?" Everyone in the surroundings gazed at Yanji. "Will Yanji protect Yi Xian?" Yanji fell silent. "It has nothing to do with me." Yi Xian smiled and said nothing. Gao Ke stared at Yanji. "Teacher Yanji, this human was protected by you. But now he is openly killing people in my god race. What do you think?" Yanji was silent. Gao Ke sneered. "Don't tell me you want to protect a human?" Yanji sighed softly. She looked at Yi Xian. "I don't really like the god you killed. However, he is still a god, not a human. You killed a god, so you deserve to die." As she said that, she began to chant in God's language. She wanted to activate the seal in Yi Xian's body. At this moment, her voice suddenly stopped, because a sword was directly inserted into her throat. Yanji's eyes widened. Yanji was filled with disbelief. The person who attacked was Yi Xian. Yi Xian shifted his consciousness and a sword light flew out. Before Gao Zhu in the distance could react, his head was sent flying. Although Gao Ku was the vice dean, most of the gods in the Theological Institute were scholars. They only liked to research and were actually very weak. Of course, the most important thing was that Yi Xian, could already enter the fourth spacetime. After seeing Yi Xian kill Gao Ku in an instant. This chapter is not finished. Please continue. At this moment, everyone present was dumbfounded. Killed just like that? Yi Xian looked at Yanji and smiled. "Are you a little surprised?" Yanji stared at Yi Xian. "You." Yi Xian grinned. "Your seal is useless against me," Yanji said in a deep voice. "We are friends, right?" Yi Xian blinked. "Nonsense." As he said that, he raised his hand and slashed. Yanji was directly erased. "Friends?" He felt that it was a little funny. This woman actually wanted to trick him. At this moment, Yuan Qing suddenly said, "Human." "You." Yi Xian looked at Yuan Qing and the others. "Hand over all your academic research, immediately." The gods were furious. Yuan Qing quickly said, give it to him, quickly." As she said that, she took out a storage ring and handed it to Yi Xian. The rest of the gods were a little confused. One of the gods said in a deep voice, "Instructor Yuan Qing, how can we be threatened by a human?" Before he could finish his words, a sword was pressed against his forehead. The god was stunned. Then he said, "I think it's fine." As he said that, he quickly took out a storage ring and handed it to Yi Xian. The gods. Soon all the gods gave the storage rings to Yi Xian. The storage rings contained their lifetime's research. Yi Xian took all of the storage rings. He looked above his head and said with a smile, "Goodbye." As he said that, he disappeared. As soon as he left, Yuan Qing heaved a sigh of relief. As if she thought of something, her face became gloomy. This human has become a great disaster. We can't let him live. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of her. He grinned. Surprised? Yuan Qing was stunned. Just as she was about to attack, Yi Xian raised his hand and slashed. Yuan Qing's head flew into the air. How dare you? A furious shout suddenly resounded from afar. Yi Xian turned around and vanished. As soon as Yi Xian disappeared, an old man showed up. It was the Grand Elder Yanzhu. Yanzhu's expression became ferocious when he saw Yi Xian flee. How dare you? He clawed forward as soon as he finished speaking. Countless spaces away, Yi Xian frowned slightly. He suddenly turned around, and at this moment, a giant hand came straight at him. A powerful pressure immediately enveloped the space-time he was in. Yi Xian frowned. It's chasing me from so far away. He didn't think too much about it and he slashed with his sword. Bang! As the sword light shattered, Yi Xian retreated repeatedly. However, the enormous hand was shattered as well. As soon as Yi Xian came to a stop, a powerful aura rushed towards him. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. He did not choose to fight it head-on. Instead, he activated the green profound sword and disappeared into the spacetime. As soon as he vanished, Yanzhu appeared. Yanzhu frowned deeply when he saw Yi Xian disappear again. This human had actually escaped right under his nose. Right at this moment, the patriarch of the God clan Mo Yen appeared. Yanzhu said solemnly, "Wasn't this person sealed by Yanji?" Mo Yen shook his head. "I was too careless." Yanzhu sighed softly. "This Yanji was also careless. We've underestimated this human." Mo Yen spoke in a low voice. "Our top priority right now is to find this person as soon as possible. Yanzhu, if this chapter is not finished, please turn the page." Nodding, he seemed to have thought of something and asked, "Has God General Yu Qin died?" Mo Yen nodded, "Yes." As he spoke, his expression became slightly gloomy. "I was investigating this matter earlier, and now I still don't know if he really died at the hands of that woman in a plain dress." Yanzhu sighed once more. "I never expected that the human race would actually develop to such an extent." Mo Yen said, "Now isn't the time to be thinking about this. Our top priority right now is to find these people as soon as possible. Since they were able to break through the restrictions set up by my God clan, it means that they're extraordinary geniuses. Now that they've arrived in our cosmos, I'm worried that they'll come into contact with the divine Tao civilization. Especially Yi Xian. He stole the spatial rings of Yuan Qing and the others." As he spoke, he suddenly turned around. "Pass down my order to search for Yi Xian with all our strength." "Understood." A voice resounded not too far away. Mo Yen looked into the distance. "Elder Yanzhu, you'll be personally in charge of this matter regarding Yi Xian. I'm going to investigate the cause of God General Yu Chen's death." Yanzhu fell silent briefly before he spoke out. "I'm going to mobilize all the divine generals." Mo Yen was stunned. "All the divine generals?" Yanzhu nodded. "That's not all. I'm going to mobilize the divine guards as well as the 10 divine generals." Mo Yen spoke in a low voice. "Grand Elder Yanzhu, he's just a human." Yanzhu looked at Mo Yen. "I can't underestimate them anymore." This was especially so for Yi Xian. He had instantly killed the vice dean. What did this mean? This means that in the short few days he was locked up, his strength has increased again. Mo Yen remained silent. Yanzhu sighed in a low voice. "My intuition tells me that we might have even underestimated that woman in a plain dress and that man in a green robe." Mo Yen said in a low voice. "Earlier, Yanji told me that the woman in a plain dress should be at most a rank 8 expert. Because that sword can't lead to the 4th dimension, Yanzhu suddenly said, "She is dead." Mo Yen. Yanzhu looked at Mo Yen. "Patriarch, Yanzhu is dead. He had died because of his own carelessness, and because he had underestimated his enemy. If we still believe what she said, then we may end up like her." Mo Yen remained silent. Yanzhu continued, "Up until now Boya is dead, Yen is dead, and Yu Qin is dead. There's also Yuan Qing and the others. Why don't we pay attention to these humans? Moreover, those humans broke through the restriction we set up without anyone's help. This means that their talent and creativity are no weaker than us gods. Our God clan must take them seriously." Mo Yen said, "Grand Elder is right. From now on, the experts of the clan are at your disposal. However, that Yi Xian has already escaped. How are you going to find him?" Yanzhu smiled. "It's not difficult to force him to show himself, because he wants to protect those humans. And those humans will become his greatest burden." Mo Yen nodded slightly. "I understand. Go do it." Yanzhu turned and left. Mo Yen also turned and left after a moment of silence. Right after the two of them left, a man suddenly appeared here, and it was the Imperial Monarch. The Emperor who was almost killed by the woman in a plain dress. The Emperor took out the portrait in his hand. After looking at it for a while, he looked into the distance and said softly, "The God clan wants to kill Senior's brother. With Senior's brother's current strength, he is definitely not a match for the God clan. And Senior's brother and that green-robed man have no intention of helping. I alone won't be able to resist the divine race. No, I have to find some helpers to help young Master Yi at the critical moment. At that time I'll cripple myself a bit. This way young Master Yi will owe me a huge favor, and the favor he owes me is the same as Senior Sukun owes me a favor. Damn, this monarch is truly a genius." With that, he turned and disappeared. Go find helpers. End of this chapter. Chapter 1866. Yi Xian arrived at the fourth layer, found a quiet place and sat down cross-legged. He took out all the storage rings and began to scan them with his divine sense. The spatial rings contained the lifetime research of the divine clan scholars. To him, these things were still of great value. Humans were inferior to the divine clan, and since they were inferior, then they naturally had to learn from them. That was nothing to be ashamed of. Yi Xian sighed softly after he finished absorbing all the ancient books in the spatial rings. Needless to say, the divine clan's divine civilization was far more advanced than human civilization. There was no comparison at all. For example, the divine clan had explored the sixth layer of space-time, but humans hadn't even figured out the second layer, and some had even separated the two into separate studies. They were too far behind. Yi Xian started to study how to control the fourth layer of spacetime. Needless to say, the divine clan's understanding of the Tao of spacetime was very thorough, especially when it came to controlling spacetime. Infinite World. Desolation City. There was a city governor's estate in Desolation City, and the reason Desolation City was so orderly was because of this city governor's estate. To be more precise, it was because of the mysterious city governor. A 9th rank expert. However, he wasn't an ordinary 9th rank expert, because he was the oldest 9th rank expert in the Infinite World. When Emperor Jun arrived at the city governor's estate, a black-robed old man blocked his way. The old man's appearance was 70% to 80% similar to a human, and the only difference was that his ears were extremely sharp, and his eyes were dark blue. The old man glanced at Emperor Jun but didn't speak. Emperor Jun smiled. "Tell that old geezer that I have something good to tell him." The old man nodded slightly. "Wait a moment." He turned around and left as soon as he finished speaking. It didn't take long for the old man to appear before Emperor Jun again. "Your Majesty, the old master doesn't want to see you." Emperor Jun roared with laughter. "Tell him that I was almost instantly killed." The old man frowned when he heard this. "Based on your Excellency Emperor's strength, no one in this world can kill you instantly." Emperor Jun smiled. "Just tell him, Jingyu." The old man hesitated for a moment, nodded and left. A while later, the main gate of the governor's residence suddenly opened and Jingyu walked out. He glanced at the emperor and said, "Master invites you in." The emperor walked into the manor and followed Jingyu to a small courtyard where an old man lay. He was wearing a thin linen robe and was missing an arm. This person was the city lord of Desolate City. No one knew his name. The emperor was taken aback when he saw that the old man was missing an arm. "You old fart you." The old man glanced at the emperor. "It was that human girl who almost killed you, wasn't it?" The emperor mused. "Don't tell me she cut off your arm." The old man said indifferently, "What do you think?" The emperor's face turned grim. "Even you can't beat her?" The old man sneered. "Fight? Are you kidding me?" Before the old man could do anything, he was almost beheaded by her. The emperor was speechless. The old man slowly closed his eyes. What is this divine clan doing? How can this human be so strong? The emperor thought for a while and said, "The god tribe is after her." When, if this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. The old man then turned to look at the emperor. "Arrest her." The emperor nodded. "Kill her and you'll get 2 types of crystals." After a moment of silence, the old man said, "Who is the current patriarch of the god-human race?" The emperor said, "Mo Yen." The old man frowned. How did he become the head of the family with his IQ? The emperor smiled. He probably doesn't know the senior's true strength. The old man was silent. The emperor continued, "Old man, the god race is doomed this time. I know one of their elders, so I wanted to warn them, but..." At this point he shook his head. "After some thought, I decided to forget about it." The old man was puzzled. "Why?" The emperor sighed. "I've looked into it. That senior Suchuan is from the human world and she cares a lot about her brother in the human world, young Master Yi." At this moment the old man suddenly took out a portrait. The person in the portrait was Yi Xian. The old man looked at the emperor. Is this the one? The emperor nodded. That's him. Old man, why do you have it too? The old man said after a moment of silence. She told me that this was her brother and she just stared at me. He clenched his right fist. Luckily, the old man was smart enough to promise that he would take care of this young man. Otherwise, the old man's head would have flown off his neck. The emperor was speechless. The old man looked at the emperor again. Is the young man here? The emperor nodded. He is. And now, the entire god-human race is after him. Damn it. The old man suddenly sat up. Have the god-human race lost their minds? Do they know what they're doing? The emperor shook his head. Obviously not. The old man was puzzled. Then why didn't you just kill them? The emperor sighed. I think there are two reasons. First, she has no interest in the god-human race. Second, she probably wants to train her brother, young Master Yi. The old man said solemnly, there are two reasons. The emperor nodded. I wanted to talk to the god-human race, but when I found out that they were going after young Master Yi, I knew that the feud between them would never be resolved. The old man shook his head. The god-human race is retarded. The emperor said, you can't blame them entirely. After all, they created humans. They wouldn't think that a human could surpass them. The old man said, I'm confused about that as well. Humans were created by the god-human race. How could a human be so powerful? The emperor looked at the old man. Do you know what level she's at? The old man shook his head after a moment of silence. I can't. He couldn't. The emperor said, even you can't see through her, old man? The old man said indifferently, if I could see through it, would I still be able to find out that I was killed? The emperor smiled bitterly. The old man suddenly asked, where is young Master Yi now? The emperor said, he ran away. I don't know his exact location because young Master Yi ran a little too fast. The old man looked into the distance. What's the god-human race doing? The emperor smiled. They're making a lot of noise. As far as I know, the god-human race's first elder, Yanzhu, has already called back the god-human race's 10 immortal generals. They're obviously up to something big. The old man looked at the emperor. This young Master Yi can't. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. Something's wrong. The emperor nodded. I know, but now is not the time for us to make a move. The old man smiled. You want to make a move at a critical moment so that this favor will be more valuable. The emperor nodded. That's a selfish motive of mine. He then sighed. Old man, you and I can't see through Senior Su Chang's strength. That means she's at least at the 10th rank. Here's the question. How did she reach the 10th rank? The old man was silent. The 10th rank? He had been studying it for millions of years. But he still hadn't reached the 10th rank. He smiled bitterly at the thought. A human had surpassed the limit of the 9th rank and reached the 10th rank. That was terrifying. The emperor suddenly said, Old man, the god-human race isn't weak. If they risk everything to kill this young man with your and my strength, I'm afraid. The old man fell silent. He wasn't afraid of the god-human race, but he wouldn't underestimate them either. After all, this was a race with an ancient heritage. Even in this endless universe they held great weight. A moment later the old man said, Keep an eye on the god-human race. No matter what, we can't let them kill young Master Yi. The emperor nodded. All right. With that he stood up and left. The old man suddenly said, You must find a way to contact young Master Yi. Tell him to be careful of the god-human race. I'm afraid they'll kill him right away. The emperor nodded. I'll find a way to contact young Master Yi, but you must think of a way. I'm afraid the god-human race will do anything to kill him. If that's the case, we'll be pinned down and young Master Yi is killed. That'll be troublesome. The old man was silent for a moment and said, I'll arrange it. The emperor laughed. I'm relieved to hear that. The old man had lived for so long and his network wasn't something the emperor could compare to. Now the old man was calling for help. A moment later the emperor stood up and left. The old man looked into the distance and said softly, God-human race, you've got guts? He then turned to Jingyu. Pass down my order. Have the elves who are still alive come here at once. Also send word to those who owe me favors. If they still remember that favor, they should come here at once. Jingyu bowed. Understood. With that he turned and left. The old man slowly closed his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. The god-human race. Under the order of the god-human race's grand elder Yanzhu, the 10 divine generals had all returned to the god realm. Apart from that, Yanzhu also mobilized countless mysterious powerful fighters from the god-human race. In a large hall, Yanzhu looked at a god in a black robe. Still no news? The god in the black robe shook his head. That human seems to have evaporated. There's no news of him at all. Yanzhu slowly closed his eyes. A moment later he said, "Let's go to the human world." The god in the black robe looked at Yanzhu. "To the human world?" Yanzhu said, "We'll wait for him in the human world. As long as he doesn't return, I'll slaughter millions of humans until he shows up." With that he walked out of the hall. Soon, countless powerful fighters from the god-human race headed for the human universe. End of chapter. Chapter 1867. In the fourth space, Yi Xian was still cultivating. Of course he was cultivating inside Xiaota. He could now control the fourth space. According to God's standard, he could barely be considered a rank 9 expert. Of course there was still a gap between him and a real rank 9 expert. After all, a rank 9 expert was not as simple as just controlling the fourth space. However, if he were to face a rank 9 expert he could still fight. At least, he wouldn't be suppressed by the opposite space and be unable to fight back. Without cultivating, Yi Xian left Xiaota. A few days had passed. If the god race could not find him they would definitely attack the humans. He had to return to the human race. If he did not return with Shaoan and Jingji's strength, they would not be able to fight against the god race. Human universe. On this day, countless mysterious experts suddenly descended. They were the god race experts. Their leader was Yanzhu. Somewhere in the starry sky, Shaoan looked at Yanzhu and the others calmly. Beside her was Jingji and God Emperor Lin Shan. Shaoan whispered, "Is he still alive?" Lin Shan smiled, "He is definitely alive." Shaoan and Jingji looked at Lin Shan. Lin Shan smiled, "The reason why I am so sure is because of these gods. They are still alive. This means that Yi Xian is still alive." Shaoan whispered, "Plain dress woman?" Lin Shan whispered, "Yes." Shaoan asked, "You think she is stronger than the god race?" Lin Shan's eyes flashed with disdain, "How can the god race compare to her?" What a joke. Not far away Yanzhu suddenly laughed, "My god race cannot compare to a human?" Lin Shan looked at Yanzhu and smiled, "Let's not talk about this. You are here today to exterminate the human race. It's true that we're no match for your divine clan, but your divine clan can forget about annihilating the entire human race." Yanzhu looked at Lin Shan, "My god race created you humans and can also exterminate you." Lin Shan laughed, "As long as the god race has the plain dress woman, we will exist forever." Plain dress woman. Yanzhu chuckled, "A woman in a plain dress? I hope that she will appear soon and become your savior." As soon as he finished speaking, an expert from the divine clan behind him dashed towards Lin Shan. Lin Shan suddenly shouted, "Young Master Yi, if you don't show yourself the old man will self-destruct." There was no response. Lin Shan's expression froze. Still no response. Lin Shan smiled bitterly, "Young Master Yi, the old man still wants to live a few more years. Now it seems that I can only leave in advance." As he spoke, a terrifying aura suddenly surged out of his body. He chose to self-destruct. Facing so many divine race experts, he could only choose to self-detonate and hope to drag one of them down with him. At this moment, the head of the divine race powerhouse that was charging towards Lin Shan suddenly flew off. Blood spurted out from his neck like a fountain, and then it formed a beautiful arc in the air. All the gods were stunned. In the distant horizon, a man slowly walked over. It was Yi Xian. Seeing Yi Xian, Yanzhu narrowed his eyes. As for Lin Shan and the other two, they immediately heaved a sigh of relief. If young Master Yi did not appear, they really could only choose to self-destruct. Yi Xian walked in front of Shaoan and the other two and smiled, "Fortunately we are not late." Jingji, who was at the side, said indifferently, "I thought you would wait for us to self-destruct before appearing." Yi Xian looked at Jingji and smiled, "Why would I?" As he spoke, he turned to look at Yanzhu, "How should I address you?" Yanzhu looked at Yi Xian, "Yanzhu, great elder of the divine race." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Elder Yanzhu. This chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. Elder, as far as I know, there is no deep hatred between the humans and the divine race. I feel that it is not impossible for the two races to coexist peacefully. What do you think?" Yanzhu smiled and said, "In theory it is possible. However, why should my divine race let you rise and become a threat to us?" Yi Xian looked at Yanzhu, "As far as I know, The infinite universes do not know that the divine race is a universe, right? Yan Zhu looked at Yi Xian, but your human race was created by my divine race. Yi Xian nodded, I understand. Since we cannot coexist peacefully, then we will fight. Beside Yan Zhu, a divine general suddenly disappeared. Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Boom. The sword light shattered, and the divine general was sent flying. Yan Zhu's expression gradually became solemn when he witnessed this scene. This divine general was a level 8 expert. How did Yi Xian's strength reach such a level in just a few days? The divine general wanted to attack again, but Yan Zhu suddenly said, Allow me. The divine general bowed slightly and then retreated to the side. Yan Zhu looked at Yi Xian, opened his palm and then pressed down lightly. In an instant, the space around Yi Xian became illusory. Space-time suppression. Yi Xian stood there without moving, and he allowed the space around him to change. Meanwhile, Yan Zhu suddenly flipped his right hand. Bang! The space where Yi Xian resided was turned upside down, and then Yi Xian started to fall rapidly. The fourth space-time abyss. With a flip of his hand, Yi Xian was blasted into the space-time abyss. However, Yan Zhu frowned because he noticed that Yi Xian was actually completely fine. Moreover, the space-time abyss where Yi Xian resided was gradually becoming illusory. Yan Zhu's pupils constricted when he saw this. You've mastered the fourth space-time abyss. At this moment, Yi Xian had returned to the battlefield. He gazed at Yan Zhu and smiled, Take this. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly drew his sword and slashed. 1,800 overlapped sword drawing techniques. This slash caused the space before him to shatter, and it didn't just shatter the first space-time abyss, even the third space-time abyss was shattered. A wisp of a solemn expression flashed in Yan Zhu's eyes when he witnessed this scene. He opened his right hand and pressed it down lightly. Bang! Yi Xian's sword light was directly suppressed by the pressure of the fourth space-time abyss. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of Yan Zhu, and a wave of sword light instantly drowned him and Yan Zhu. Core sword domain. Bang! In an instant, the space where they resided was directly shattered. Even the fourth space-time abyss was directly shattered. In the fourth space-time abyss, Yan Zhu had retreated over 1 kilometer, and there were over 10 sword marks on his body. On the other hand, there was a palm print on Yi Xian's chest. Both of them had won and lost in this collision. Yan Zhu gazed at Yi Xian with disbelief in his eyes. You've actually mastered the fourth space-time abyss. At this moment, his heart was surging like a tidal wave. Yi Xian has actually mastered the fourth space-time abyss. How could this be possible? Yi Xian glanced at the battlefield. Besides Yan Zhu, the strongest amongst the other experts of the divine clan was only at the 8th space-time abyss. In other words, only Yan Zhu was a threat to him. Thinking of this, Yi Xian looked at Yan Zhu, and the next moment he directly disappeared on the spot. In the distance, a trace of hostility flashed in Yan Zhu's eyes, and he suddenly pressed down with his right hand. Bang! With a loud explosion, Yan Zhu directly retreated, and in the process of his retreat, another flying sword slashed at him. Yan Zhu blasted out a punch, and the moment this punch blasted out, the entire starry sky trembled violently. Rumble. The flying sword was blasted away. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the green profound sword flew back into his hand. This chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. He looked at Yan Zhu in the distance, and Yan Zhu slowly clenched his right hand. In an instant, the power of countless stars around him gathered towards him. For a moment, the entire starry sky trembled. Just as Yi Xian was about to draw his sword, Yan Zhu suddenly blasted out a punch, and this punch, countless stars gushed out from his fist. This punch gathered the power of thousands of galaxies. Yi Xian held his sword horizontally to block. Invincible sword domain. Rumble. The expanse of space that Yi Xian resided in was instantly obliterated, but Yi Xian was completely unharmed. His sword domain had forcefully resisted all the force of Yan Zhu's punch. A wisp of a complicated expression flashed through Yan Zhu's eyes when he witnessed this scene. He knew that he couldn't kill this human before him. Strictly speaking, the current Yi Xian was already a level 9 powerhouse. Coupled with the green profound sword in his hand and those formidable sword techniques, he couldn't do anything to Yi Xian at all. When he thought up to here, his clenched right hand relaxed and he gazed at Yi Xian. In the past, we underestimated you, and my God clan paid a heavy price for that. But it won't happen again now. As he spoke, he opened his palm, and a divine order appeared in his hand. In the next moment, the divine order shot into the sky. Bang! An extremely terrifying aura suddenly swept out from the starry sky. Meanwhile, Yanzhu spoke abruptly, "Greetings, ancestor." Ancestor. Yixuan was stunned. Damn it. He's calling on our ancestor just like that? He summoned the ancestor just like that? Not only Yixuan but the other gods were stunned as well. They didn't expect that Grand Elder Yanzhu would directly summon the ancestor. This ancestor's soul was a trump card of the god clan. He used it just like that? Wasn't he thinking too highly of Yixuan? Yixuan's expression was slightly ugly. Damn it. We haven't even fought yet and he's already summoned the ancestor. Who would use such a powerful move right away? He wasn't mentally prepared at all. At this moment an old god appeared in the starry sky. Amo Wuxian, the ancestor of the god clan. He was also the one who created the human race. A superpower who once stunned an era. Amo Wuxian glanced around and he frowned. At this moment, countless gods knelt down in unison. Greetings, ancestor. Amo Wuxian looked at the gods below. What's the matter? As soon as this voice came out, the entire starry sky actually split apart. Seeing this scene, Shaoan and the others' expressions instantly became solemn. This space-time couldn't even withstand his voice? How terrifying was this? Even the woman in the plain dress wasn't this terrifying. The white-haired old man Lin Shan's expression was extremely solemn. This was a super big shot. In the distance, Yanzhu bowed respectfully and then he said, "Ancestor, the human race has become a great disaster." A great disaster. Amo Wuxian frowned slightly, and he turned to look at Yixuan. He sized up Yixuan and then he said, "Him." Yanzhu nodded, not just him but the person behind him as well. Amo Wuxian looked at Yixuan and after a moment he shook his head, "The human race is still like an ant." As he spoke he opened his right hand and then he pressed it down lightly. As he pressed down, an extremely terrifying force swept down. A strength that surpassed level 9. This was a strength that surpassed level 9. And his target wasn't just Yixuan, it was the entire human universe below. As soon as this palm descended, the entire human universe would collapse. By Yixuan's side, the pale Jingji said in a trembling voice, "Young Master Yi, they called the ancestor first, you can do the same." End of this chapter. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.